Chapter 727. Chu Luiyue just turned around and was about to leave when Zhu Hong suddenly stopped him. Wait! Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at him in confusion. Why? Is there anything else? Zhu Hong frowned and hesitantly pointed in the direction they came from. Actually, when we came over just now, we met a group of black cavalry. There were about a dozen of them, and their situation wasn't optimistic. We were too far away back then, so we missed them. I don't know how they are now. Chu Luiyue paused. You want us to go and help them? Zhu Hong looked hesitant. At first, he didn't have this thought, but he saw that Lei Laosi was extremely powerful, and Chu Luiyue's combat power wasn't to be underestimated. So he had this thought. He actually didn't have much to do with those black cavalry. He just felt that it would be a pity if they died just like that. However, he also knew that he was asking too much of them. In this godforsaken place, it was already very difficult for a person to protect their own life. How would they have the extra strength to help others? If he had this ability, he would do it himself. Unfortunately, even he had to rely on Chu Luiyue and the rest to barely survive now. He already owed them enough, so how could he still ask them to do anything? No. Zhu Hong was silent for a while and finally shook his head. But just as he spoke, he was interrupted by Chu Luiyue. Where are they? What? Zhu Hong looked at Chu Luiyue in shock and couldn't react for a moment. When Chu Luiyue saw his expression, how could she not tell what he was thinking? There's also the Black Cavalry's Deputy General Mu Qinghe in our group, so it's reasonable for us to go and save them. As she spoke, she looked at Lei Laosi. Big brother Lei, please invite everyone over. We'll go together. Okay. Lei Laosi wasn't interested in this matter, but since Her Highness had this plan, he naturally wouldn't shirk from it. Lei Laosi turned around and quickly ran back. Seeing Lei Laosi's figure disappearing quickly, Zhu Hong finally returned to his senses and looked at Chu Luiyue in shock. You really want to go? Did Chu Luiyue not know how much energy it would take to save people in this place? Why not? The corners of Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Her eyes were clear, and there was a sense of valiance between her brows. These black cavalry soldiers were indeed led by Mu Qinghe, but at the end of the day, they were once her soldiers. Shang Guanwan wanted to use these people to seize their strength and seek a future for herself. He had to ask her if she agreed to it first. Zhu Hong stared blankly at the woman in front of him. She clearly had the appearance of a peerlessly beautiful young girl, and there was even a smile on her face. But for some unknown reason, her body actually carried a faint noble aura, as if she was looking down upon the world. For a moment, Zhu Hong felt extremely at ease. It was as if she would definitely be able to save everyone if she said she was going to save them. This kind of nobility and pride emitted from her bones definitely wasn't something that ordinary people could have. Didn't they say that Chu Luiyue came from an ordinary background? But from the looks of it now, it was very different from the rumors. Recalling how he said that he would take care of these people in Chongshu Pavilion, Zhu Hong's face flushed a little. All of them had probably underestimated Chu Luiyue. Lei Laosi quickly brought the rest of the people over. When Mu Hongyu saw Zhu Hong and the rest in a sorry state, she was worried and hurriedly asked, Senior brother Zhu Hong, how are you guys? We're fine. Just now Lu Yu and Lei, big brother Lei saved us, and even gave us elixirs. We're fine now. When Zhu Hong saw that Mu Hongyu was safe and sound, he heaved a sigh of relief. It's good that you guys are safe and sound. When we first saw that you guys were missing, we were still rather worried. But from the looks of it now, those worries were unnecessary. From the looks of it, the few people who followed Chu Luiyue were clearly the safest. Mu Hongyu then heaved a sigh of relief. Other than Zhu Hong, the others were still unconscious and in a sorry state. But looking at Zhu Hong's appearance, he did seem to be much better. We had an accident back then. Forget it. All these aren't important. We'll talk about it in the future. The most important thing is that everyone is fine. Mu Hongyu looked at Chu Luiyue gratefully. Lu Yu, thank you so much. Chu Luiyue smiled gently. Zhu Hong and the rest helped us previously, so it's only right for them to help us now. Zhu Hong was instantly embarrassed. Chu Luiyue isn't talking about the incident where he stood up for us at Pingliang Square, right? What kind of help can that be considered? Chu Luiyue saved our lives. Zhu Hong, you said that there's a portion of the Black Cavalry over there? Mu Qinghe directly asked in a deep voice. Zhu Hong's expression also became much more serious as he nodded. I did see some people just now, but I don't know if they're still there. But it hasn't been too long, so we should be able to find them smoothly. Mu Qinghe nodded. Then I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to lead the way. Vice Admiral Mu, you're welcome. Zhu Hong immediately said. After saying that, he lifted his foot and was about to walk in that direction. Stop. An impatient voice sounded. It was Elder Qiushi. His expression was very sour as he looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, are you really going to save those people now? Have you forgotten that our top priority is to find the third princess? If we all go to save the Black Cavalry now, what will happen to the third princess? If the important matter of finding the third princess is delayed because of this, Vice Admiral Mu, can you bear the responsibility? A trace of impatience and viciousness finally appeared on Mu Qinghe's face, which had never changed for the past 10,000 years. I never said that I wouldn't look for the third princess. But now there's no news of the third princess, and there's no clue at all. Even if we look for her, where are we going to find her? As the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, I naturally have the responsibility to save my own soldiers. Elder Qiushi has always been worried about the third princess. Why don't you look for her yourself? You. Elder Qiushi's face turned red and white. He was about to curse when he met Mu Qinghe's fierce and cold gaze. His heart trembled, and he swallowed the rest of his words. If Elder Qiushi doesn't plan to look for the third princess yourself, and wants to follow us, then please don't mention this again in the future. We know very well what we should do, and what we shouldn't do. There's no need for Elder Qiushi to guide us. Mu Qinghe's words were very rude, and she didn't leave Elder Qiushi any face at all. Elder Qiushi had never been insulted in public like this before, and he could only gnash his teeth in hatred. He looked at Jiang Yuqing, but he saw that Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to speak. Clearly, he was also on Mu Qinghe's side. Elder Qiushi secretly hated him. Mu Qinghe had been very low-key for more than a year, especially because of her previous identity as the Emperor's concubine's confidant. She was cautious in her words and actions. Because of this, Elder Qiushi felt that he was superior to Mu Qinghe. He didn't expect that when he became tough, he was still the same as before. Mu Qinghe looked at Zhu Hong. Please lead the way. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 728. Then, under Zhu Hong's lead, everyone moved forward together and rushed in the direction they came from. After being scolded, Elder Qiushi finally shut his mouth obediently. This time, everyone's ears could finally be at peace. Zhu Hong had fed each of them medicine, and it didn't take long for them to wake up one after another on the way. Luckily, their injuries weren't too serious. With the effects of Chu Luiyue's pills, they could barely keep up. After a period of time, Zhu Hong finally stopped, but his brows slowly furrowed. That was because there were only a few corpses left that were almost completely submerged. From their clothes and faces, they were indeed the Black Cavalry. However, the other people were nowhere to be found. Those people from before were all here. Why are there only these few left now? Muttered Zhu Hong. Mu Qinghe looked around, and her face was so cold that it seemed like there was a layer of frost on it. This black swamp is flowing much faster than before. Chu Luiyue and the others hadn't been here before, so they couldn't compare. However, the remaining people, including Jiang Yuqing and the others, all realized this after taking a closer look. As expected, perhaps it's because of this that those people left this place? Guessed Zhu Hong. I just don't know how they're doing now. If they're still alive, everything will be fine. But if they're dead, it should be because of the movements caused by that mother tree. As Mu Qinghe spoke, she looked up ahead. That was the direction where the black swamp was flowing. After stopping for a while, he took the lead and walked forward. However, Chu Luiyue purposely slowed down and walked to Qin Yi's side. Big brother Qin, the seal you mentioned just now, what exactly is it referring to? Qin Yi lightly shook his head. I only know that there's a seal below, but I haven't seen it personally, so I'm not very clear about it. As he spoke, He glanced at Tuanzi calmly. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. What he means is, Dumpling might know a thing or two. Dumpling blinked. Chu Liyue calmed down. It seemed that it did have some understanding. Dumpling, why didn't you tell me before? Chu Liyue asked inwardly. Dumpling buried her head in her shoulder. Because it didn't want her to go. It had been here for a long time, and had vaguely guessed something. There was probably something under the seal that was not to be trifled with. From the very beginning, it did not want Chu Liyue to be involved in this matter. That was why he didn't say anything. Chu Liyue patted its head with a slightly restrained expression. Dumpling had already broken through to become a divine beast now. To be able to make it so fearful, it was most likely not simple. And Shangguan, she vaguely felt that something was wrong. However, since they were already here, there was no way to retreat. They could only face it head-on. The group continued forward. They were very fast. After about half an hour, they finally seemed to hear some movement in front. Mu Qinghe immediately looked over and saw a group of faint figures. It was the Black Cavalry. However, the number of people seemed to be much more than what Zhu Hong had said earlier. At a rough glance, there were at least more than 100 people. Mu Qinghe was about to go over when she suddenly realized that there were tree roots tightly wrapped around those people. Especially those people outermost. Almost all of them were covered in scales and were on the verge of death. A few of them were even unconscious. She didn't know if they had fainted or... The tree roots seemed to be trying to separate them. But the soldiers were still hugging each other tightly. They continued to entangle with those crazy tree roots. This scene actually seemed a bit solemn and stirring. The people who followed all fell into silence. Looking at this scene, they couldn't hide their shock. Mu Qinghe's expression was terrifyingly cold. She immediately wanted to go forward. Vice Admiral Mu, rushing forward rashly at this time. I don't think it's appropriate. Chu Liyue suddenly spoke. Mu Qinghe turned around. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife. What are you trying to say? Chu Liyue smiled and pointed at the spot where the roots were intertwined. As long as we get rid of this thing, we can naturally rescue them. Otherwise, it's just a waste of effort. Mu Qinghe stared at Chu Liyue for a while. The anger and impulse in her heart finally gradually suppressed. Chu Liyue was right. In the current situation, they could only use their wits and not force. The scene just now had a huge impact on her. For a moment, she actually almost rushed forward. You have a way. Chu Liyue nodded. Yes. A tree root flew over. Shangguan raised her hand and lightly drew on the tree root. The bright red liquid quickly seeped into her palm. Then it entered the dark green fireball in her dantian. The tempered power surged out from the fireball again and spread to Shangguan's limbs and bones. Sensing that another part of the Yuan meridian in her body had been restored, Shangguan let out a long sigh. The feeling of having power again was simply too satisfying. She already couldn't remember how long she had waited for this day. As long as she persevered for a while and devoured enough power, she would be able to recover completely. Shangguan flicked the tree root away and looked at her hands. Her skin had gradually returned to its normal color from its initial blood-red color. She believed that it wouldn't be long before she could. Suddenly, Shangguan's expression changed. Her chest trembled violently. Her legs went soft, and she knelt on the ground. The pure gold sacred armor hit the stone platform and let out a muffled sound. Shangguan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The net that she had carefully planned was directly cut off. That was more than 100 people. Originally, as long as she succeeded this time, she would basically be able to recover completely. But she was actually stopped by someone just like that. The energy in Shangguan's chest and abdomen went berserk, almost tearing her internal organs apart. Blood kept flowing out from her mouth and quickly dyed the ground red. Some even fell on the chest of the pure gold sacred armor. Who is it? I will cut you into pieces. Shangguan shouted herself hoarse. The corners of her eyes were scarlet, and her face was filled with madness. Suddenly, the void in front of her trembled violently. Then a colorful stream of light streaked across. A ball of scarlet flames wrapped in a vast aura attacked her glabella. Digression. 12 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 729. Sheng Guanwan was shocked and immediately retreated. At the same time, she set up a barrier in front of her. She didn't know if it was because of the fireball, but the barrier she set up now had a faint green color. Boom! That scarlet flame hit the barrier hard. A loud boom sounded. The barrier shook violently. Sheng Guanwan's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something. Half paralyzed on the ground, she looked at the scarlet flame that suddenly appeared with fear and anger. She was afraid that it would rush over in the next moment. Fortunately, the power of the barrier was much stronger than she had expected. After an intense battle, the crimson flame was intercepted. It was just that the color of the barrier seemed to have become lighter. However, Sheng Guanwan didn't notice this at this moment. When she saw that the scarlet flame was unable to break through the barrier and finally retreated, she finally let out a long breath. It seemed that the power she had devoured during this period of time was still useful. But where did that scarlet flame come from? Sheng Guanwan supported her body and stood up with difficulty. She took a step forward and stared at the flame. Such a strong and bright red color. She seemed to have seen it before, and that flame was also floating quietly in the air. It didn't move forward or backward. This made Sheng Guanwan have the illusion that she was being stared at. She felt uncomfortable all over. She clenched her teeth and wanted to get rid of that flame. But at this moment, she had just dodged that attack with great difficulty. If she rashly faced it head-on, she wasn't sure what would happen. She wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. There were some bloodstains on the pure gold sacred armor. This flame, that's right. Sheng Guanwan's eyes suddenly lit up. Wasn't Chu Liyue's flame the same color? Could it be that Chu Liyue made a move? No. Impossible. Sheng Guanwan frowned again. Chu Liyue was here. It was already a problem whether he could protect his own life. How could he give her such a blow? She looked at the ball of flame again, and her gaze suddenly froze. Within the flames, there seemed to be a blurry figure. She stared at him carefully without blinking. Suddenly, she sucked in a breath of cold air. The thing inside seemed to be a 9-colored heavenly pheasant. No, it looked a little different from the 9-colored heavenly pheasant. And the pressure was even stronger. Just as Sheng Guanwan was guessing, the figure in the flame suddenly raised his head. Then he opened his eyes. A brilliant rainbow light flashed past. Sheng Guanwan's heart skipped a beat. She reacted almost immediately and rushed forward. His origin power transformed into a sword and stabbed out viciously. However, that ball of scarlet flames instantly exploded. Bang! In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. It really was her. Chu Liyue opened her eyes, and a cold, murderous intent flashed across her eyes. Although it was only a glance, it was enough for her to recognize that it was indeed Sheng Guanwan. She looked a little different from before. Although her appearance and figure were still the same, the expression on her face, there seemed to be something wrong with it. In addition, the black rune between her brows looked extremely strange as well. What made her feel the most disgusted was that Sheng Guanwan was actually wearing the pure gold armor. Chu Liyue pursed her lips tightly, and her face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. She had obtained the pure gold armor by accident back then, and had always treasured it. She didn't expect that Sheng Guanwan would take it for her own. Liyu, how is it? Did you find out anything? Mu Hongyu's voice pulled Chu Liyue back to her senses. She closed her eyes and looked up. Her eyes were clear and calm. She nodded. That seems to be the middle of the swamp. There's a person there, but I can't see who it is. It's already very impressive to be able to find out this much. Mu Hongyu sighed. Chu Liyue smiled and patted Dumpling, who was on her shoulder. It's all thanks to Dumpling. She had finally persuaded Dumpling to help just now. It was now a mythical beast, and had stayed here for more than a year, so it definitely knew more about everything here than they did. As expected, Dumpling directly found Sheng Guanwan's location. As for her, because she had a contract with Dumpling and their minds were connected, she could easily see everything that Dumpling had found out. Sheng Guanwan was very vigilant. For safety, she didn't let Dumpling stay for too long, and quickly retreated after taking a glance. She didn't leave any clues for Sheng Guanwan. Recalling Sheng Guanwan's ferocious expression when she suddenly came back to her senses, Chu Liyue sneered in her heart. After doing so many dirty things in secret, Shang Guanwan was naturally more guilty than anyone else, and was more afraid of being discovered. Even if she was the high and mighty third princess of the Tianling dynasty, she definitely wouldn't be able to survive if this matter was spread out. Using such a despicable and insidious method to devour other people's forces and take their lives, just to help herself recover her cultivation. Once such a behavior was exposed, what awaited Shang Guanwan was the cursing of thousands of people, and the punishment of never being reincarnated. Of course she was afraid. At this moment, Shang Guanwan was probably panicking, right? Thinking of this, Chu Liuyue's mood improved a lot. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, how are the soldiers? Mu Qinghe had just distributed the pills to the last batch of black cavalry. Hearing this, he raised his head and looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated expression. 4 of them can't make it, and 21 of them are seriously injured. The rest are fine. Chu Liyue swept a glance at those people. The situation just now was so dangerous, and the casualties were already better than expected. This was also because most of the black cavalry that came this time had stayed in the Dahuang swamp before. If it were ordinary soldiers, the result would definitely be worse. Mu Qinghe paused and said, "Thank you." Chu Liyue smiled faintly. "Didn't Vice Admiral Mu already thank me just now? Being able to save them is the result of everyone's efforts. Vice Admiral Mu doesn't have to thank me alone." Mu Qinghe pursed his lips tightly. Although Chu Liyue said it casually, everyone present saw what happened just now clearly. Chu Liyue was the one in charge of everything. If it weren't for her and the red gold phoenix, who cut off the coiled tree roots and burned more than half of them, the rest of them wouldn't be able to help even if they wanted to. Her actions were swift, and almost everyone was shocked on the spot. Only then did they understand that Chu Liyue, who had broken through to the 5th stage, was stronger than they had imagined. Chu Liyue didn't claim credit, but Mu Qinghe couldn't accept this kindness with a clear conscience. The black cavalry was very important to him, and he was indeed grateful to be able to save these people. As the Deputy General of the Black Cavalry, this gratitude is necessary. Chu Liyue tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. "Vice Admiral Mu, you're welcome. This is what I should do." She naturally had to save her people. "Let's go to the center of the swamp as soon as possible and capture the mastermind behind the scenes." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 730. Chu Liyue's suggestion received everyone's approval. Now they basically knew that someone purposely caused such a huge commotion in the Mystic Forest. Those tree branches that crazily devoured the cultivator's strength were obviously being controlled by someone. They could only leave after they dealt with the mastermind. Chu Liyue's gaze swept across the black cavalry soldiers. Actually, she still had an impression of some of them. However, things were still the same now, but the people had changed. She looked at Qin Yi. "Big brother Qin, these 20 people, do you have a way to take care of them? Other than the few that can't be saved, the remaining 21 people aren't in good condition either. The best solution is to let them stay and rest properly. If I force them to follow the main group forward, I'm afraid." Qin Yi stared at her intently as if in deep thought. "It seems like Her Highness still wants to help." He paused for a moment and said, "I can help them set up a barrier and let them stay here peacefully. As long as the extremely dangerous situation from before doesn't happen again, there shouldn't be a problem." Chu Liyue heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank you, big brother Qin." Qin Yi's lips curved up slightly as he lowered his eyes slightly. A tinge of helplessness and indulgence flashed across his long and narrow eyes. Her Highness has already changed into another identity, and her appearance and figure are completely different from before. However, her personality doesn't seem to have changed much. He raised his hand and waved it lightly. A cyan-colored barrier was formed in an instant. It protected the 20 people within it. The barrier emitted a faint glow and was dense with boundless suppression. It was frightening. One of the black cavalry soldiers reacted first as he cupped his fists and said seriously to Qin Yi, "Thank you, young Master Qin." This voice instantly reminded the others. All the soldiers thanked him gratefully. Qin Yi chuckled. "You don't have to thank me. If you want to thank someone, Thank Lu Yu. If she didn't save all of you first, we wouldn't be able to talk about anything else. Besides, if she didn't say anything, I wouldn't have bothered to get involved in this mess. Who asked them to be soldiers led by Mu Qinghe? Qingyi knew that what happened back then actually had nothing to do with these soldiers, so he really couldn't blame them. But when he saw Mu Qinghe here, he felt very unhappy, and even felt annoyed looking at these people. All the officers and soldiers turned their heads to thank Chu Luiyue. Thank you, Miss Chu. Even though most of them were injured, their thanks were still filled with energy and sincerity. They had all experienced countless life and death situations, so they naturally knew how precious life was. Chu Luiyue had saved so many of their lives. How could they not thank him? A black cavalry soldier standing at the front suddenly lowered his voice and said, "That's right. Miss Chu, my name is Tian Zhuangzhuang. If you need anything in the future, just let me know. I, Tian Zhuangzhuang, will definitely not shirk my duty." He didn't say which squad he belonged to in the black cavalry. He only said his name. This meant that he was expressing his gratitude personally. Chu Luiyue's eyes curved. Me too. Miss Chu, I'm Zhou Kaiyan. We owe you our lives, so we'll do whatever you say in the future. As Zhou Kaiyan spoke, he secretly glanced at Mu Qinghe and scratched his head at Chu Luiyue in embarrassment. Of course, that's when we're not wearing the black cavalry armor. Hee. When they wore the armor, they didn't have a name and only had the title Black Cavalry. Obeying military orders was a soldier's duty. The Black Cavalry, especially the ones led by Mu Qinghe, had always been strict with military orders and followed them to the letter. But when they took off their armor, they were themselves. Those who could fight their way out of Dahuang Swamp were all iron-blooded good men. How could they not repay a favor? I Jiang Mingshan too. Me too. And Xinji. And voices rang out one after another. The deep and powerful voices reverberated, as if they wanted to tear apart this dark and cramped space. Chu Luiyue felt something surging in her chest. She knew. She always knew. These people. She took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in her heart. I understand everyone's intentions. This is actually a small matter, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Those who need to recuperate stay behind. The rest will go together. When this is over, we'll look for you again and return together. Chu Luiyue pacified the soldiers with a few words. Those who should stay all consciously stood on the other side. As for the large group who were about to leave, after hearing Chu Luiyue's words, they all stood together with high morale. Mu Qinghe looked at this scene and was secretly shocked. Chu Luiyue and these soldiers had only just met, but she could already easily make them obey her. She seemed to have some kind of inexplicable aura that could make people unconsciously listen to her and do as she said. Honorable, dignified, but also full of affinity. Without batting an eyelid, she controlled the entire scene. She was like a natural superior. Even if she was only a teenage girl and came from an ordinary background, she did not feel the slightest bit out of place when commanding so many people. It was as if it was supposed to be like this. Mu Qinghe had fought her way up from the bottom, so she knew the temperament of these soldiers best. They had seen countless life and death situations. Their flesh, blood, tendons, and bones were almost all tempered. On the surface they looked well-behaved, but in fact they were very stubborn. Other than their generals, they would almost never listen to anyone else's orders. Even Shangguan, Wang could not completely control the Black Cavalry. This was also another important reason why she insisted on bringing him this time. Only with Mu Qinghe would these people unconditionally obey Shangguan Wan's requests. But Chu Luiyue, probably it was still because she saved them today? Mu Qinghe thought silently in her heart. Looking at Chu Luiyue's pure appearance, she felt that she was overthinking. These soldiers also understood that even if they wanted to repay Chu Luiyue, they definitely could not use the name of the Black Cavalry. Otherwise, who would the Black Cavalry belong to? Perhaps she was really overthinking. Mu Qinghe suppressed these thoughts and moved forward with everyone. After the red flame disappeared, Shangguan Wan fell into deep fear and worry. Who was watching her? Who saw her? Who knew what she was doing? Previously, she thought that she would not be noticed by anyone if she stayed here. But now she knew that she was ridiculously wrong. She anxiously paced back and forth. With such a potentially dangerous existence, she really could not feel at ease. No, no. Now, I should recover my Yuan meridian first. Just now, she had prepared for a long time, and was about to attack the black cavalry. But she did not expect to be stopped. Now, she had to find them again. Her gaze turned sharp, and she attacked in another direction. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 731. Actually, there were still quite a number of people left who could do it. For example, the disciples from those sects were almost all extremely outstanding geniuses. Needless to say, the Daijing Yuan meridian was middle grade or even high grade. Shang Guanwan checked around and quickly chose someone. The Yuan meridian in her body had already recovered by more than half. She only needed a few more times to succeed. This made Shang Guanwan feel much more at ease. As long as she could complete this task, nothing else mattered. She licked her lips, and the dark green light in her eyes flashed again. However, she didn't know it herself. Just as she held her breath and was about to make a move, a strange sound suddenly came from behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately looked back vigilantly. At the same time, she waved her force. At this moment, her force had already turned into a light green color. It transformed into a sharp blade in midair and quickly swept over. Crack! The sound of something shattering was heard. She focused her eyes, and only then did she see that when the black swamp surged, a ghastly white skeletal hand had floated out. Her attack just now had directly cut off the hand bone. The mud churned and quickly swallowed the bone and disappeared. Phew! Shang Guanwan patted her chest and let out a breath with lingering fear. She thought that that thing had come to spy on her again. She turned around, intending to concentrate and do it again. A bright scarlet flame suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. Ah! Shang Guanwan screamed and immediately retreated. At the same time, she set up the barrier again. However, this time, the red flame didn't come forward again. It just floated there quietly. However, this made Shang Guanwan even more flustered. As expected, someone was spying on her in the dark. She was flustered and furious. She immediately went forward to get rid of that thing. However, a rainbow-colored light flashed, and the flame disappeared again. It took another look. Shang Guanwan was so angry that her liver hurt. Her chest and abdomen were suffocating, as if they would explode in the next moment. The other party was extremely cunning, appearing so suddenly and disappearing so quickly that Shang Guanwan had no time to react, let alone do anything. Shang Guanwan was still angry for a while. She gritted her teeth and decided to solve the problem of her Yuan meridian first. However, her state of mind had been completely disrupted by that ball of flame. Devouring energy to reconstruct the Yuan meridian was an extremely exhausting task. Right now, Shang Guanwan's heart was in a mess, and her mind was in a mess. She couldn't do anything at all. She was so angry that she paced back and forth on the platform. The boots of the pure gold armor made a sound on the ground. Tap, tap, tap. It was cold and crisp, but it also carried a trace of heavy pressure. Patter. Something seemed to have sunk. Shang Guanwan looked down, her eyebrows furrowed tightly. The bloodstains on the pure gold armor were slowly condensing into blood droplets before dripping onto the ground. That sound just now was the sound of blood dripping down from the arm that had accidentally rubbed against it. Shang Guanwan's heart skipped a beat. She then looked at her chest and realized that the situation was the same here. These were all intentionally or unintentionally done by her. At first she didn't pay much attention to it. But now, why does it seem like something is wrong? After the bloodstains dripped down, the pure gold armor was still clean and neat. It didn't look like it had been stained with blood before. Could it be that this pure gold armor is originally like this? Shang Guanwan muttered in a low voice. She had only seen Shang Guanyu wear this pure gold armor before. It was her first time wearing it, so she didn't know much about it. There were actually many traces of battle on it, but there were no bloodstains. Perhaps it was really because this pure gold armor wasn't stained with blood. Shang Guanwan thought to herself. When she thought that someone was secretly watching her, she became frustrated again. The other party was watching her so closely. Could it be that they had discovered something? And every time she wanted to try again, that fireball would suddenly appear. This made Shangguan uneasy. She couldn't concentrate on repairing her Yuan meridian. After a long time, she still didn't find anything. Just as Shangguan was at her wit's end, the black rune in between her brows suddenly floated down and swayed in front of her eyes. Shangguan's pupils shrank. A trace of deep fear flashed across the depths of her eyes. A hoarse voice suddenly sounded from the rune. "Are you so useless?" That voice was low and hoarse. It was hard to tell if it was a man or a woman, but it instantly made Shangguan's face turn pale. Who are you?" A low laugh came from the rune, containing undisguised mockery. "Don't you know who you relied on to be where you are today? Why, you don't want to admit it now." After her guess was confirmed, Shangguan's face instantly turned even uglier. All along, she knew that there was a mysterious existence in her body. She had heard this voice before, but only twice. The first time was many years ago. It was also that time that made her want to kill Shangguan. She had made up her mind to snatch everything from her. The other time was the night Shangguan died. At that time, her Yuan meridian had been completely destroyed by Shangguan. It was this voice that had appeared and told her how to restore her Yuan meridian. It was not that Shangguan was not afraid, but she also yearned for Jiang Yuqing. She wanted to obtain power and authority. She wanted to obtain everything that Shangguan once had. Therefore, she had always obeyed this voice. She didn't expect that it would appear in such a form today. Countless guesses flashed through Shangguan's mind as she looked at the strange black rune. She tried her best to calm herself down, but her body was trembling violently. You. So it's really you. Please forgive me for not noticing it just now." Slap. It was as if an invisible hand had slapped Shangguan hard on the face. The crisp sound of a slap instantly rang out. Shangguan fell hard to the ground. Her helmet was also thrown off. Half of her face instantly became red and swollen. Blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. "You're getting bolder by the day to play tricks in front of me." The voice in the rune was cold and sinister. Shangguan struggled to stand up. "I didn't slap. This time, it was the other half of her face that was slapped." Digression, 6 a.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 732. Shangguan fell heavily to the ground again. Her hairpin was knocked to the ground, and her hair was scattered messily. This time, she was hit until she saw stars and her vision turned black. She opened her mouth, and her lips and teeth were filled with a strong smell of blood. All she spat out was blood. Her entire face was numb. After a short pause, the intense pain surged up like a tide. But this was not as strong as the deep fear that suddenly erupted in her heart. She knew that this mysterious person was very strong, but she didn't know that he was so terrifying. She had been easily dealt with. One had to know that her current strength was almost at the early stage of a stage 8 warrior. But when the other party attacked, she didn't even have time to react. She could only be beaten. These two slaps completely made Shangguan aware of the gap between her and the other party. "Now, are you willing to tell the truth?" That voice sounded faintly, like a demon's voice echoing in her ears. Shangguan's heart trembled violently. She curled up and knelt with her head lowered. This junior knows her mistake. This time, she didn't dare to play any tricks. She could only obediently lower her head and admit her mistake. "Please give this junior another chance. If you have any orders, this junior will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation." In the past 2 years, Shangguan had never knelt to anyone, let alone begging in such a humble tone. Father was in a coma, and she was the ruler of the Tianling dynasty. She was second only to one person and above all. So kneeling at this time made her feel quite ashamed in her heart. But she didn't dare not kneel. Her little life was in the other party's hands. If you had done this earlier, wouldn't there have been so much trouble? The black rune swayed gently and sneered. Shangguan didn't dare to move. "Your Yuan meridian has long been damaged by the Tianjin Yuan meridian. Logically speaking, it can't be repaired. It was me who gave you a chance to live. Now the opportunity is in front of you, but you are so useless. You are indeed mud that can't support a wall." That person's tone was slow, but there was an air of superiority. Every word was very straightforward, not leaving any face for Shang Guanwan. Shang Guanwan's face turned red and white, but she didn't dare to refute. "Senior, please guide me." Shang Guanwan was not stupid. She knew that the other party must have come for her Yuan Meridian. Sure enough, the man continued. "Your position has already been discovered. There's no point in running. You might as well make use of the time to heal your Yuan Meridian. After you find the target, I will help you set up a barrier, so that no one will disturb you. As long as you stay calm, everything else is not a problem." Shang Guanwan was a little hesitant. But senior, there must be someone who knows what I'm doing now. If the news spreads, so what if I know? As long as you don't bump into them on the spot, no one can do anything to you. Don't forget who you are." She woke Shang Guanwan up with a start. Her heart shook as she suddenly understood what was going on. That's right. She was the third princess of the Tianling dynasty. As long as no one saw her with their own eyes, who could force her to confess? If she was really exposed in the future, wouldn't it be fine if she denied it? When Shang Guanyu died, the entire Tianling dynasty was shaken. Countless people suspected the cause of her death, and some people even almost found out that she and Jiang Yuqing were involved. But didn't they solve the problem safely in the end? "Thank you for your advice, senior. No need to thank me. I have my own reasons for helping you. I'll give you 15 minutes. If you still can't do it, don't blame me for not giving you a chance." Yes. Shang Guanwan didn't dare to ask any more questions. She quickly sat cross-legged and began to look for a suitable person. The black rune floated back between her eyebrows. In fact, this process didn't feel anything, but Shang Guanwan felt that there was something extra on her forehead, and it was very uncomfortable. She held her breath and closed her eyes. As she looked for someone, she thought to herself, "This black rune." Actually, even she herself did not know when it had entered her body. All these years, other than the 2 times it took the initiative to speak, it almost didn't exist. Shang Guanwan was vaguely worried, but she had always tried her best to ignore this matter and forget its existence. She didn't expect it to suddenly appear today. Moreover, it appeared in such a strange way. Don't try anything funny. Otherwise, your fate will be even more miserable and pitiful than you can imagine. The voice sounded coldly in her mind. Shang Guanwan shivered and responded. Then she forced herself to retract her thoughts. The entire mystic forest, except for the area where the mother tree was, had completely collapsed. As a result, all the people who were trapped underground followed the black swamp and flowed towards them. Shang Guanwan roughly checked, and was suddenly surprised to find that the number of people she could sense was much less than before. It seemed that there were fewer people from the Black Cavalry, and a small number of disciples from the sect. She felt a sense of suffocation in her chest. After wasting so much time just now, it was no wonder that there were fewer people. With so many people, there would definitely be people who could break free. Especially those who were in groups. Their strength was extremely strong when they were united. If she didn't use some special methods, it would be difficult to keep them. Just like the 100 or so Black Cavalry from before, she had spent a lot of effort to trap them. She didn't expect that in the end. Shang Guanwan took a deep breath and found a good target. It was those people from the Purple Shao Sword sect. What Shang Guanwan didn't know was that during the period of time when she didn't do anything, Chu Luiyue and the others met several groups of people and gathered them all. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry, and a small number were disciples from the sect. Fortunately, other than one of the disciples from Dragon Teeth Mountain who had died, the rest were all found. Although they were all injured to different extents, they persevered and kept up after some simple treatment. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to Zhu Hong. At that time, he was the first to discover that Mu Hongyu had left. He had planned to bring people to look for her, but something happened to Jiang Yuqing. He made a prompt decision and dragged everyone from Dragon Teeth Mountain together. When they fell into the swamp in the end, they were still together. It was only later that he was unable to hold on and split into 2 groups. However, the distance between them wasn't very far. Other than that, there were also disciples from Holy Flame Palace and Tianji Mansion who were found along the way. Roughly speaking, there were more than 300 people in this group, including a small number of people who had to stay in place because of their serious injuries. There were almost 400 people. Unknowingly, Chu Luyue had become the backbone of the group. After all, only Chu Luyue knew how to find the mastermind behind all of this. In addition, she had contracted a divine beast, which attracted countless envy and admiration from the crowd. Even Jiang Yuqing, who had the highest status, had a slightly inferior presence. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks and looked ahead. There's someone ahead. I'll go take a look first. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 733. Everyone stopped in unison and waited for Chu Luyue. Along the way, they were almost used to doing this. Chu Luyue would take the lead to investigate whenever they encountered any situation. After confirming the specific problem, they would act according to Chu Luyue's instructions. At first, some people weren't convinced. After all, Chu Luyue's slender figure and overly beautiful face really didn't look like someone who could do such things. But after Chu Luyue led them to avoid a few attacks and saved even more people, such doubts gradually disappeared. All of them followed obediently. Lei Laosi followed as usual. Chu Luyue glanced sideways and smiled at him. Big brother Lei, you don't have to follow me every time. We're so close. Even if something really happens, I can handle it. Lei Laosi paused for a while before speaking in a low voice. It's always good just in case. Her Highness is capable. But in this world, an accident that can be predicted isn't an accident anymore. Back then, Her Highness was only one step away from becoming a Stage 9 warrior. How valiant was she? What happened in the end? She was still framed by a traitor and died in a sea of fire. Back then, the 13th Yu sect was too trusting of Her Highness, so others took advantage of her. Now that it happened again, they definitely wouldn't let such a thing happen a second time. Chu Luyue looked at the stubborn Lei Laosi and felt warmth in her heart. Thank you, big brother Lei. Lei Laosi coughed uncomfortably. He looked up unintentionally and vaguely saw a few people. They looked like a few young people, and the one at the front looked a little familiar. Who is that? Chu Luyue followed his line of sight and looked over. Then she smiled. Isn't this purple Shao sword sect Song Qingyan? There were 3 people beside him, and Yang Qin was one of them. At this time, Song Qingyan had just cut off the tree roots that wrapped around him, and was about to help the others. When he heard the commotion, he immediately turned around vigilantly. Who is it? He first saw Lei Laosi in front, and was secretly shocked. This unfamiliar man is extremely powerful. He gripped the sword in his hand tightly. Lei Laosi had already recognized Song Qingyan, but he still had to pretend that he didn't. He sized up Song Qingyan and sneered. You don't have to do this. If I want to attack you, none of you can stop me. Song Qingyan frowned, and was about to speak when he saw Chu Luyue walking up from behind him. Big brother Lei, I know these people. Don't scare them. Chu Luyue said with a smile. Lei Laosi scoffed softly and crossed his arms, having no intention of helping at all. He had no interest in saving the people of the Purple Shao Sword sect. Chu Luyue, why is it you? Song Qingyan was still wary of Lei Laosi, and his gaze toward Chu Luyue was filled with doubt. She looked fine, as if she wasn't injured at all. He had sacrificed so many treasures and barely managed to hold on until now, but he still looked much worse than Chu Luyue. There must be something wrong with her. Chu Luyue's gaze swept across these people. Song Qingyan was still fine. Other than some bloodstains on his body, he was basically uninjured. After all, he was the young master of the Purple Shao Sword sect, and he would have many protective treasures on him. The others, on the other hand, were a little more miserable. However, Yang Qin seemed to be fine too. Chu Luyue suddenly recalled that Song Qingyan seemed to be hugging Yang Qin in his arms just now. She smiled. Young Master Song, don't worry. We were passing by here, and came over after hearing the commotion. We didn't expect to meet you guys. We wanted to see if we could help, but it seems like we don't need to anymore. Song Qingyan sized up Chu Luyue suspiciously and frowned. Help us. You. His words were filled with undisguised contempt. Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. Fine. Since he already said so, why should she stick her warm face to his cold butt? It seems like young Master Song doesn't think highly of us, so we won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye. After Chu Luiyue finished speaking, she turned around and left decisively. Lei Laosi chuckled and immediately followed her. Her Highness's personality seemed to have changed a little compared to before. If it were in the past, Her Highness would at least talk more with Song Qingnian on account of the Purple Shao Sword sect. But now, she turned around and left without saying anything. Awesome. Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Lei Laosi really left so decisively, Song Qingnian was stunned. What exactly does this mean? Looking at the two of them leaving, Song Qingnian frowned, and anger rose in his heart. A mere Chu Luiyue actually dared to throw such a look at me. My Purple Shao Sword sect doesn't need anyone's help at all, let alone Chu Luiyue. What a joke. Did she think that she could intimidate others, just because she called an unknown powerful figure over? He retracted his gaze in disgust and pulled Yang Qin, who was closest to him, up before cutting off the tree roots on her body. Qin, you shouldn't be so weak. Is there something wrong with your body? Song Qingnian asked casually. Yang Qin's face tightened, and she instinctively moved her wrist back. As the surroundings were dark, Song Qingnian didn't see the change in her expression. No, maybe I'm tired from the long journey? Also, I met a bottleneck in my cultivation recently, so Song Qingnian didn't really suspect anything, so he believed her after hearing what she said. It's fine. With me around, I'll definitely protect you. Yang Qin looked at him gratefully and thanked him repeatedly. Song Qingnian was in a great mood from her admiring gaze, so he threw Chu Luiyue's matter to the back of his mind. Then he made a move again, planning to pull the remaining two people up. We have to get out of this damn place as soon as possible. Before he finished speaking, a cold wind suddenly came from the darkness. Swoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Several thick tree roots were thrown towards the few of them at the same time. Song Qingnian knew that this was bad and immediately pulled Yang Qin into his arms. Then he dodged backward. With his move, the remaining two people who hadn't been pulled out of the swamp were tightly entangled by the tree roots. Save Ugh! The short cry for help came to an abrupt end. Crack! The sound of bones breaking could be heard. The tree roots actually wrapped around their necks and twisted violently. Their heads were tilted in a strange posture, and their eyeballs protruded. Not long after, they completely stopped breathing. Chu Luiyue turned around with a sharp gaze. She tapped her toes, and immediately flew over. At the same time, she raised her wrist, and a ball of scarlet flames transformed into a fire whip, quickly wrapping around the tree roots. Dumpling! Chu Luiyue shouted. Dumpling's wings flapped, and a colorful stream of light flew out. It intertwined with the scarlet flames. The flames directly drilled into the tree roots and spread all the way. Ah! The boiling temperature caught Shangguanwan off guard, and she screamed. A ball of flames flew over. Swoosh! It actually directly penetrated the barrier and pounced toward Shangguanwan. Shangguanwan subconsciously injected her force into the pure gold armor. However, not only was the pure gold armor not activated, but it also repelled all her power. A look of deep shock flashed across Shangguanwan's eyes. The pure gold armor. And it even had an owner. Digression. Today is the last day of June. Those who have tickets, please don't forget to vote. The tickets will be voided tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Chapter 734. The shattered barrier instantly transformed into countless streams of light and condensed in front of Shangguanwan again. At the same time, a black ripple rippled out from the rune in between Shangguanwan's eyebrows. Quietly it stuck to the enchantment. Buzz! A terrifying pressure spread out. Boom! The two forces collided together. That ball of flame was finally blocked outside. However, the barrier was also shaking violently, as though it would shatter at any time. Shangguanwan's face was filled with fear. Almost just now, she truly felt the surging and terrifying power contained in that ball of flame. If that attack really landed on her body, she was afraid that Shangguanwan looked at the pure gold sacred armor on her body and paused for a moment. Then, as though she had gone crazy, she quickly took off the pure gold sacred armor. Her actions were very fast. There was a trace of deep fear in her anger. She didn't even care that her hair and clothes were messed up. Bang! Shangguan threw the pure gold sacred armor on the ground. As though she was afraid of something, she took 2 steps back. However, her eyes were still staring at it. Her eyes were cold and ruthless with raging anger. It was as though she wanted to burn a hole in the pure gold sacred armor. How is this possible? How is this possible? Shangguan muttered to herself. Her face was green and white. Her chest was heaving up and down violently as she panted heavily. She clenched her fists tightly. Her nails dug deep into her palms and blood dripped down. However, how could she care about that at this moment? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. It was as though her head was going to explode. The pure gold sacred armor used to belong to Shangguan Yu. After Shangguan Yu died, the pure gold sacred armor became an ownerless item. Logically speaking, under such circumstances, anyone could activate the pure gold sacred armor, as long as they poured their force into it. However, just now, when Shangguan wanted to do so, she was shocked to find that her force couldn't be poured into the pure gold sacred armor. Didn't this mean that the pure gold armor still had an owner? No, it can't be. She's already dead. How could it be? Shangguan's lips trembled. She kept comforting herself, but her heart was still beating violently. Thinking about the situation just now, she couldn't calm down no matter how hard she tried, let alone convince herself. The pure gold armor lay quietly on the ground. It was exactly the same as when Shangguan first took it out. There was nothing wrong with it. Shangguan stared at him, her expression changing. No, Shangguan Yu was definitely dead back then. His physical body had perished, and his soul had dispersed. She had seen it with her own eyes. There was no way she was still alive. Thinking of this, Shangguan took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. Could it be because the last bit of origin power in her body hadn't fully recovered? She turned her head to take a look. The few tree roots that he had sent out earlier had all been burned. It wasn't easy for him to find the right opportunity to kill the 2 purple Shao Sword sect disciples. However, before he could devour their strength, he had already. Shangguan was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. This person definitely did it on purpose. And this ball of fire. She looked at the ball of fire coldly and resentfully. In the center of the red flame, there was a gorgeous colorful stream of light that was also dancing. It seemed to be monitoring and also provocation. You guessed right. This is indeed Chu Liyue's power. That hoarse voice sounded again. Shangguan's heart sank. She couldn't help but frown. But the power contained in it is clearly stronger than Chu Liyue. I'm not done yet. That voice lazily interrupted Shangguan. Other than her, there's also the red-tailed red phoenix, which is the 9-colored heavenly pheasant that was about to break through at the beginning. What? Shangguan widened her eyes in shock. This, you mean, the 9-colored heavenly pheasant has successfully broken through to become a red-tailed red phoenix. And Chu Liyue was able to move together with the red-tailed red phoenix. It was self-evident what it meant. This Chu Liyue's luck isn't ordinary. A divine beast like the red-tailed red phoenix is extremely arrogant. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't form a contract with a human, especially with a mere stage 5 warrior. That voice had a layer of coldness. It was obvious that it was also very surprised by this matter. You worked so hard, but in the end, it was all for someone else. These words were full of ridicule. Shangguan was already in deep shock. Being ridiculed like this made her feel even worse. Her hatred for Chu Liyue also deepened. She had only jumped down to repair her Yuan meridian. How long had it been? Yet, Chu Liyue had taken the initiative. Divine beast. That was a real divine beast. She hadn't even seen it before. In the blink of an eye, Chu Liyue had already formed a contract with it. Bitch. It's useless to say this now. Even if a divine beast's soul is destroyed, it won't recognize a second master. You don't have to think about this anymore. Besides, Chu Liyue has probably guessed what you're doing now. The most important thing now is to repair your Yuan meridian and leave this place. Thank you for your guidance, Senior. Shang Guanwan suppressed the resentment in her heart with great difficulty. However, deep in her heart, she was still brooding over this matter. The black patterns on the barrier suddenly scattered. Like a drop of ink dripping into water, the entire barrier was quickly dyed black. Shang Guanwan's figure was gradually covered by the barrier. She thought to herself, Chu Luiyue must be with the people from the Purple Shao Sword sect now. Since that was the case, she could just find someone else to attack. She didn't believe that Chu Luiyue could really stop her. Shang Guanwan sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. Unconsciously, she glanced at the pure gold armor lying quietly on the ground again. Uneasiness rose in her heart. When she was fully recovered, she must take the pure gold armor for herself. The black runes fluttered gently. An invisible ripple flew towards the ball of flame. Boom! The flame exploded. Even the roots of the tree were blasted away by the explosion. Chu Luiyue quickly retreated. Dumpling flapped her wings, and a hurricane suddenly appeared. All of the chaotic energy was blocked. After a series of explosions, the entire space finally quieted down. Chu Luiyue frowned. Someone was helping Shang Guanwan. Unfortunately, the other party acted too quickly. She couldn't see it clearly. The key was that this person was extremely powerful. Even Lei Laosi might not be the other party's match. When did Shang Guanwan have such a mysterious and powerful helper? A sobbing sound came from behind. Chu Luiyue turned around. Yang Qin was covering her face and crying in front of the two disciples who were already dead. She seemed to be very sorrowful. It's all my fault. Senior brother, you shouldn't have saved me first. Song Qingyan was also upset because of the loss of these two disciples. But when he heard Yang Qin crying like that, his heart immediately ached. How can I blame you? You were the closest to me back then. Who else should I save if not you? Yang Qin sobbed as she looked at him pitifully and innocently with her red eyes. If Miss Chu had taken action earlier, perhaps it would have been different. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 735. Upon hearing that, Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and turned around. Miss Yang, what do you mean by that? Yang Qin glanced at Chu Luiyue. Her heart skipped a beat when she met his dark jade-like eyes. She quickly looked away as if she was on fire. She took half a step back, as if she was frightened by Chu Luiyue's appearance. Miss Chu, don't misunderstand. I was just saying it casually. I didn't mean anything else. These two senior brothers are extremely outstanding disciples of the Purple Shao Sword sect. It's a pity that they died like this. I'm blaming myself. If I had insisted on asking you for help just now, all of this might not have happened. When Chu Luiyue heard this, she looked nonchalant, and her lips curved up into a cold smile. He thought that Yang Qin would be more obedient after the previous incident. He didn't expect her to still be able to distort the truth and not distinguish right from wrong. However, Song Qingyan listened to him. He patted Yang Qin's shoulder gently and comforted her softly. Qin, you can't be blamed for this. This matter has nothing to do with you at all. Don't blame yourself anymore, okay? After saying that, he looked at Chu Luiyue. The gentle expression on his face instantly turned cold. His eyes and nose were no longer his eyes, and his eyes were no longer his nose. Chu Luiyue, Qin's words are not without reason. Since you can get rid of those tree roots so easily, why didn't you take action until the two of them were hanged? I think you did it on purpose. Yang Qin had once unintentionally mentioned that she had unintentionally offended Chu Luiyue, because the Purple Shao Sword sect and the Chongshu Pavilion had always disliked each other. Chu Luiyue had intentionally or unintentionally made things difficult for her several times. Recently, Chu Luiyue had become famous in Shilling City, and Song Qingyan couldn't stand it. Coupled with Yang Qin's nonsense, he was even more disgusted with Chu Luiyue. Therefore, at this moment, he directly pushed all the blame onto Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was so angry that he laughed. If I remember correctly, I was the one who offered to help at first, but I was rejected by you. Why is it my fault now? Young Master Song, don't tell me you've already forgotten what you said at the beginning? Song Qingyan choked, and his face quickly turned red. At that time, he didn't put Chu Luiyue in his eyes at all. which was why he said that. Who knew that Chu Luiyue was actually so powerful? There were a total of 10 people from the Purple Shao Sword sect. 2 of them had already died, and now another 2 had died. Other than him and Yang Qin, the rest of them were still missing. There was no trace of them. Even if Song Qingnian had a noble status, he couldn't help but feel a little flustered. He was the one who had brought people there, and all of them were disciples with the most potential in the Purple Shao Sword sect. Now that there were so many casualties, he didn't know how to explain it when he returned. This resentment was naturally vented on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue, those who were dragged down here were more or less injured, but you were the only one who was unharmed. You know better than anyone else what exactly is going on here. You knew that the situation was dangerous, but you still chose to stand by and watch. If you really wanted to save them, you would have done it long ago. Why wait until now? Chu Luiyue was secretly sighing at Song Qingnian's increasing ability to pester endlessly when he heard Lei Laosi scolding him. What the **ck are you spouting? Just as Song Qingnian was speaking confidently, he shuddered after being yelled at by Lei Laosi and forcefully swallowed the rest of his words. He looked at Lei Laosi angrily and embarrassedly. Why you? Who was he? He had never been insulted like this to his face. It was extremely unpleasant, extremely humiliating. Saving you is kindness, not saving you is my duty. We came over with good intentions, and it's fine if you don't appreciate it. In the end, you still want to blame us. If you're so capable, why don't you save them yourself? Aren't they all from your Purple Shao Sword sect? What has it got to do with us? Don't think that I can't tell. You were clearly at the same distance as those people just now. It's just that you're selfish and dirty, so you saved this one first. I heard that you're the Purple Shao Sword sect's young master? Ha! If the Purple Shao Sword sect's people knew that their young master abandoned his disciple for a woman, I wonder how they would react. Lei Laosi scolded Song Qingnian like a cannonball. Chu Luiyue touched his nose. Back then, Lei Laosi was a rather refined and elegant young master. He didn't expect his appearance to change now, and his ability to scold people had also improved. Song Qingnian was scolded until he couldn't refute at all, and he was so angry that he trembled. It couldn't be helped since Lei Laosi was stronger than him. Although he was arrogant and domineering, he wasn't brainless at all. If they offended Lei Laosi here, who knew if they could still get out? After scolding Song Qingnian, Lei Laosi looked at Yang Qin. And you? Yang Qin cowered and hid behind Song Qingnian. Why are you hiding? Lei Laosi didn't know what it meant to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. He only knew that anyone who offended Her Highness had to die. You don't look old, but you're really good at sowing discord. If your mouth doesn't know how to speak, I'll sew it up for you. Yang Qin was so frightened that she hurriedly covered her mouth and hid behind Song Qingnian. She didn't dare to make a sound, and only her tears fell. She hugged Song Qingnian's arm and shivered as though she was terrified. If it were any other time, Song Qingnian would definitely stand up for her. But not now. He was just forcing himself to stand there, so how could he care about Yang Qin? Chu Luiyue looked at the two of them in such a sorry state, and wasn't interested at all. They were just things that weren't presentable. Now the person I'm most worried about is still Shangguan. With someone helping, I can't freely investigate Shangguan's situation anymore. Shangguan, I'm afraid she's really going to recover her Yuan Meridian. A series of footsteps was heard. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw that it was actually Jiang Yuqing and the rest. It turned out that they stayed here for too long and didn't go back. The people behind were anxious from waiting, so they simply came together. Seeing Jiang Yuqing in front, Song Qingnian immediately seemed to have found a backer. Yuqing. He and Jiang Yuqing were close in age, and their family backgrounds weren't bad. Thus, they had always been in contact. Jiang Yuqing's gaze first landed on Chu Luiyue. After confirming that she was fine, his heart relaxed slightly before he looked at Song Qingnian. Qingnian, so it's you guys. What happened? Why are you in such a sorry state? Song Qingnian hurriedly went forward and walked to Jiang Yuqing's side. Just as he was about to speak, he remembered Lei Laosi at the side and hurriedly lowered his voice. Yuqing, you guys must be careful of Chu Luiyue. She has a problem. Jiang Yuqing's expression changed slightly. Oh, Song Qingyan continued. Her relationship with that man is unclear. Just now, she even threatened Qin and me. That's strange. The two of them previously said that they would come over to take a look. Logically speaking, they wouldn't do such a thing. How could Jiang Yuqing not guess Song Qingyan's thoughts? If it were in the past, he might still have the patience to feign civility with him. But now, hearing that Chu Luiyue was being slandered, he was very unhappy. He looked at Chu Luiyue. Luiyue, are you okay? Chu Luiyue's face turned cold and her stomach churned. Digression. I couldn't sleep yesterday. Added at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 736. This was the first time Jiang Yuqing called her this. And Chu Luiyue spent a lot of effort to control her expression. What's wrong with this fellow? However, Song Qingyan at the side was greatly shocked. Yuqing, why you just called her? Jiang Yuqing looks gentle and polite, but he's actually very arrogant. Especially now that his status is different, it's even harder for normal people to get close to him. But now, he actually called Chu Luiyue so intimately. When did the relationship between the two of them become so close? Jiang Yuqing glanced at Song Qingyan and smiled lightly as he explained. Oh right. You probably don't know, but when I met with danger previously, I relied on Lu Yu to help me escape. Speaking of which, I owe her half my life. Mu Qinghe and the rest had all seen this scene with their own eyes, so they naturally wouldn't refute him. As for the rest, they had more or less accepted Chu Luiyue's help, so they couldn't thank her enough, let alone say anything. Song Qingyan was completely dazed. At the side, Yang Qin widened her eyes in shock, and she even forgot to cry. Why you're saying? Chu Luiyue saved you? Asked Song Qingyan in disbelief. Jiang Yuqing nodded and pointed at the crowd behind him. Actually, for the people behind to be able to come out, almost all of them helped. Chu Luiyue's abilities alone are limited, so she naturally can't take on everything. However, no one could deny that she had played the most crucial role in this process. Song Qingyan looked behind him in a daze. Only then did he see the dense mass of people. At a rough glance, there were at least 300 to 400 people. All of this, Chu Luiyue helped. Song Qingyan's heart suffered a huge impact, and he didn't dare to believe it. But the person who said this was Jiang Yuqing, so he had no choice but to believe it. Recalling Chu Luiyue's swift and decisive manner, Song Qingyan gradually recovered his senses. It seems like Chu Luiyue really has some abilities, not to mention that Lei Laosi. He's very capable, but he seems to listen to Chu Luiyue a lot. With his help, it doesn't seem impossible that Chu Luiyue could do all of this. As for why she's safe and sound, that's because she wasn't swept down from the start, and she only came down when we wanted to find one. Jiang Yuqing gave a simple explanation of the situation with just a few words. He said it calmly, but it was like a stone smashed into Song's heart. At this moment, he finally understood how laughable the words he'd said earlier were. In front of Jiang Yuqing, no. I've become a joke in everyone's eyes. Song Qingyan hurriedly glanced around, and as expected, he discovered that many people were looking at him with unfriendly gazes. Most of them were actually black guards. Whispers could be heard. Miss Chu is very warm-hearted. She has been helping people along the way. She won't attack anyone, right? I think so too. Purple Shao Sword Sect. I remember that they wanted to find trouble with Miss Chu at Pingliang Square previously. I'm afraid the bad guys are making the first move. These people didn't speak loudly, but the space was dim and narrow, so any sound could be heard clearly. Song Qingyan was extremely embarrassed and felt as if there was a dagger at his back. Jiang Yuqing smiled. Qingyan, it seems like you misunderstood something. Song Qingyan's breath was stuck in his chest. After an intense internal struggle, he finally accepted his fate and clenched his teeth. Probably. Just as he wanted to brush this matter aside, Lei Laosi crossed his arms and spoke lazily. You think it's over with just a misunderstanding? You criticized us quite a bit just now, right? Now that things are clear, you don't intend to apologize? Who did Song Qingyan apologize to? But in this situation, he didn't seem to have a second choice. He could only brace himself and speak to Chu Luiyue. Sorry. It was just a short word, but it seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. Lei Laosi dug his ears. What did you say? You're too soft. I didn't hear you. Song Qingyan took a deep breath and could only raise his voice. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you guys. Then, the veins on his forehead could be faintly seen. Yang Qin was originally hiding behind him, hugging his arm and grabbing his hand with both hands. Song Qingyan used so much strength that he actually subconsciously held Yang Qin's hand tightly. Her expression changed, and she almost shouted out in pain. Her hand bones were about to be crushed. Chu Luiyue watched this scene, as if he was watching a show. Although she was a little surprised that Jiang Yuqing spoke up for her, she didn't feel anything in her heart, and even felt a little nauseous. However, since Jiang Yuqing admitted that he owed her a favor, then it would be a waste if she didn't accept it. Mu Qinghe took 2 steps forward and pointed in a certain direction. I heard some commotion over here just now. Is it because of those 2 people? Chu Luiyue followed his finger and looked over. He was referring to the 2 people who died just now. That's right. Chu Luiyue nodded and briefly explained what had happened. Of course, it was inevitable that she would mention that she wanted to help, but was rejected by Song Qingyan. Chu Luiyue spoke casually, as if he did not take it to heart. However, to everyone's ears, they felt that Song Qingyan did not know what was good for him. He actually had the cheek to complain about Chu Luiyue just now. Although no one said anything, they all felt some disdain for Song Qingyan in their hearts. Song Qingyan felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. This was the first time he felt so embarrassed in front of these people. If not for the fact that he was worried about encountering more danger, he would have left immediately. Yang Qin gently tugged at his sleeve and said softly. Only then did Song Qingyan let go of her hand. Yang Qin's wrist was almost broken. She looked down nervously and saw that there seemed to be a red bloodstain on her sleeve. She was shocked and immediately wanted to bandage it. The other party seems to have become stronger than before. We have to hurry. Upon hearing this, Yang Qin's expression changed slightly, and she suddenly said hesitantly, Are you looking for the person controlling the tree branch? I remember that the tree root flew from that direction. As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed in a direction. It was dark all around, and no one knew what she was pointing at. Jiang Yuqing frowned slightly. Really? Yang Qin nodded timidly. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and was about to speak when she suddenly felt an itch by her ear. She turned to look at Dumpling, only to see Dumpling flying straight ahead. Target Yang Qin. Chu Luiyue found it strange. She was about to ask Dumpling to come back when Dumpling flew over Yang Qin's head. Yang Qin was frightened and screamed. She retreated in a hurry, but Dumpling flapped her wings and she fell. Don't touch me, she shouted in panic, but she suddenly felt a sharp pain on her wrist. Rip, half of her sleeve was torn off. A terrifying scarlet wound on her wrist was exposed in front of everyone. A strong smell of blood suddenly erupted. It was extremely similar to the smell of the tree root. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 737. Everything happened too quickly. When the wound on her wrist tore open again, Yang Qin knew it was bad. Song Qingyan originally wanted to help her up, but his expression changed slightly when he smelled the smell. Qin, what happened to you? A fierce look flashed across Yang Qin's eyes. Without another word, she turned and fled. Her speed was actually much faster than the realm she had displayed before. Dumpling immediately followed. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to the opposite side of Yang Qin. It flapped its wings. A scarlet flame suddenly flew out and condensed into a barrier in the air. Yang Qin was caught off guard. By the time she discovered the flame boundary in front of her, it was already too late to stop. In a panic, she could only throw out a wave of force, wanting to use the rebound force to avoid the flame. However, the flame spread extremely quickly. Yang Qin had just turned around when she realized that she was completely trapped in a cage formed by flames. The scorching heat roasted her, and her entire body was burning. She clenched her teeth and set up a boundary around herself. However, how could her boundary resist the power of a divine beast like Dumpling? Not long later, her boundary began to shake, as if it would explode at any time. Chu Luiyue quickly rushed over. Yang Qin. Thoughts flashed, and she looked at Song Qingnian with tears in her eyes. Senior brother Qingnian, save me. Song Qingnian was also secretly puzzled. However, when he saw Yang Qin's tortured appearance, he felt pity for her. He hurriedly said to Chu Luiyue, who had just rushed over. Chu Luiyue, hurry up and have your magical beast release her. If this goes on, Qin won't be able to take it. However, Chu Luiyue acted as if she didn't hear him, and walked straight to the cage formed by flames. Song Qingnian was anxious. Without thinking, he reached out to pull Chu Luiyue. You didn't listen to what I said. Chu Luiyue suddenly turned her head and looked over. Song Qingnian's movements suddenly paused. The young girl in front of him had a cold expression, and her gaze was as sharp as a knife. However, this cold and indifferent gaze made him feel a deep chill from the bottom of his heart. Song Qingnian's hand froze in mid-air, but he couldn't continue to reach forward. Chu Luiyue seemed to be even more difficult to provoke than he thought. While he was in a daze, Chu Luiyue had already retracted her warning gaze and looked at Yang Qin with a cold expression. What's with the injury on your wrist? Yang Qin turned her head. I was just accidentally scratched by a tree root. It's nothing. Oh? Chu Luiyue asked faintly. Then, the smell just now was also accidentally contaminated by it. That's strange. That smell just now. It seems to be coming from your wound. That was definitely not a normal bloody smell. That smell was exactly the same as the smell she had when she had cut open the roots. This could only mean that Yang Qin's body had also devoured the power of these roots. But how did she do it? Even Jiang Yuqing and the rest avoided these tree roots. But Yang Qin was the exact opposite. Yang Qin clenched her teeth. She wanted to defend herself. But Chu Luiyue stared at her, as if she could see through everything. At such a time, no matter what she said, it would be like a joke. Seeing that Yang Qin didn't say anything, Song Qingnian panicked. Qin what exactly is going on? She was clearly still trapped in the entanglement of those tree roots just now. So why? But Yang Qin refused to say anything. Chu Luiyue pondered for a while, and suddenly took a step forward. Lei Laosi followed her worriedly. Chu Luiyue turned to look at him, and shook his head gently. I'll ask her. Don't worry. Lei Laosi could only stop. But everyone, including him, was staring at Chu Luiyue closely. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes, and a guess flashed across her mind. Previously, there was a period of time when Yang Qin seemed to be quite close to Shang Guanwan, and she would even cook porridge for Shang Guanwan. Back then, Chu Luiyue felt that something was amiss. As the third princess, Shang Guanwan had someone to take care of everything in the palace. Since when did she lack someone to cook porridge for her? Shang Guanwan said that she got along well with Yang Qin, so she let her stay in the palace for a few more days. But even a fool wouldn't believe this. What was even stranger was that those days were actually when Yang Qin testified that Chu Luiyue took away the Long Yuan sword, and was proven to be false. According to Shang Guanwan's temper, not only did she not punish Yang Qin, but she even kept her by her side. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth slightly, and said something silently. As her back was facing the crowd, only Yang Qin saw her words. Shang Guanwan used your Yuan meridian, didn't she? Yang Qin widened her eyes in shock, as if she had seen a ghost. They had done this very secretly. How could Chu Luiyue have guessed it? Seeing Yang Qin's reaction, Chu Luiyue was instantly certain of her guess. As expected, Shang Guanwan had already made a move on Yang Qin, from then on. It was normal for her to want to do this, but why would Yang Qin agree? Could it be that she was forced by Shang Guanwan's power? Chu Luiyue still remembered Yang Qin's expression when she delivered the porridge. It didn't seem like she was forced. Moreover, after such a long time, other than Yang Qin's body becoming weaker, she didn't seem to be affected much in other aspects. Looking at the strength she displayed just now, she didn't seem weak. Chu Luiyue's gaze landed on the wound on Yang Qin's wrist. Suddenly her gaze froze. The strength in Yang Qin's body actually came from Shang Guanwan. Although I don't know what method the two of them used, I can be sure that Yang Qin-er's strength would become stronger along with Shang Guanwan's strength. Then Shang Guanwan might already know the situation here. Chu Luiyue retreated without hesitation. Yang Qin-er suddenly looked up and sneered. Want to escape? It's too late. A black rune suddenly flashed across her glabella and disappeared in an instant. The next moment her aura started to surge. Qin Yi's expression changed, and he immediately said, "Retreat. She's going to self-destruct." Before he could finish his sentence, he had already rushed towards Chu Luiyue. Lei Laosi also sensed that something was amiss and immediately ran. However, the two of them were still one step too late. Boom! A loud explosion was heard. A turbulent and violent energy spread out in all directions. In an instant, flames filled the sky. When Yang Qin-er's physical body was destroyed, a black ripple appeared in the air. A strong suction force came from inside. It instantly swallowed Chu Luiyue. Her figure disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. "Luyu! Miss Chu!" everyone exclaimed in unison. The moment Yang Qin-er self-destructed, Dumpling instantly flew over and blocked in front of Chu Luiyue. The next moment, Chu Luiyue felt her vision turn black, and she was instantly dragged into darkness by some force. However, just as she was about to retaliate, she suddenly realized that the violent force was isolated outside. A barrier was emitting a lustrous glow, protecting her within it. Chu Luiyue blinked. Crystal barrier? Why did it come out by itself, before I could even move? Digression. There's only one more chapter left. I feel embarrassed to keep everyone waiting. I'll update it tomorrow at noon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 738. Just as Chu Luiyue had this question in her heart, she saw a light spot appear in front of her. The surrounding space began to squeeze towards her. Chu Luiyue's expression was slightly restrained as she circulated the force in her body. The next moment, the light in front of her brightened up. Almost at the same time, the crystal barrier suddenly transformed into countless streams of light and silently entered Chu Luiyue's body. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Just as she was about to take a closer look, she suddenly felt that her entire body was pulled out of the narrow and cramped space. Her body staggered, and it took her a lot of effort to stand firm. Chu Luiyue quickly glanced around. The surroundings were constantly surging black swamps. The smell of blood and decay was almost suffocating. She could vaguely see many mutilated corpses. There were countless dancing tree roots above. They were of different thicknesses, but all of them were scarlet in color. Under her feet was a cold and hard stone platform. Chu Luiyue's eyes moved slightly. It was almost all swamps below. The existence of this platform was particularly special. If she guessed correctly, this should be. It's really you. A sarcastic and cold voice came from behind her. Chu Luiyue couldn't be more familiar with this voice. She turned around. A woman was standing in front of her. There was a faint black barrier around her, blurring her face and figure. However, Chu Luiyue could still see at a glance that it was Shang Guanwan. Next to her feet there was something. Chu Luiyue looked over, and her pupils shrank slightly. That was her pure gold armor. Without a doubt, it was brought by Shang Guanwan. Shang Guanwan had already taken everything that once belonged to her. How could she let go of the pure gold armor? It was just that looking at it now was a little strange. The pure gold armor was extremely noble. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there was probably no other armor that could compare to it. Logically speaking, Shang Guanwan should value this thing very much. Now it was just casually placed on the ground. There seemed to be some messy bloodstains on the ground beside it. Chu Luiyue calmly withdrew his gaze and looked at Shang Guanwan. "You've been peeping in the dark. Did you enjoy watching?" Shang Guanwan asked sarcastically. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that Shang Guanwan had already guessed that she was the one who had done those things before. The corners of Chu Luiyue's lips curled into a faint smile. "Third princess, you've misunderstood. I wasn't spying on you. I was just helping everyone find you. Previously, I only took a quick glance and was unable to determine your location. I didn't expect to come here directly this time. If eldest young Master Jiang and the others knew that I had found you, they would be very happy." Shang Guanwan didn't want to listen to a single word Chu Luyue said. And she wouldn't believe it either. Are you threatening me? Shang Guanwan's expression was cold. It was fine if it was Jiang Yucheng. But the others definitely couldn't know that she was here, let alone what she was doing. Third princess, why do you say that? I'm just an ordinary person. How can I threaten you? As Chu Luyue spoke, he glanced around unintentionally. Ever since you disappeared, we've been very worried. For this reason, we didn't hesitate to try our best to barge in, and even encountered many dangers. Many sect disciples and black cavalry were entangled by those tree roots. Their deaths were really tragic. It's great that you're safe and sound. Shang Guanwan stared at Chu Luyue and was silent for a while. Then she suddenly sneered. In the silent and cold space, this sound seemed particularly abrupt and cold. Chu Luyue, you don't have to feign civility in front of me. You know better than anyone how you came here. Yang Qin is already dead. What's the point of saying this? Hearing this, Chu Luyue's expression faded. It seems like the third princess has admitted that Yang Qin's injuries and death are related to you. She should have died long ago. It's already her blessing that I let her stay for a few more days. At this point, Shang Guanwan was very clear that Chu Luyue had probably guessed many things. Therefore, she directly brought Chu Luyue over and laid her cards on the table. But you, this is the divine beast you just contracted? Shang Guanwan looked at Dumpling, who was on Chu Luyue's shoulder. Her eyes were filled with jealousy and resentment. If it wasn't for Chu Luyue, this divine beast would have been hers. What a pity, Shang Guanwan muttered softly, her face filled with dense killing intent. It was a pity that this divine beast had already been contracted and couldn't recognize a new master. So she could only kill it together with her. It wasn't easy for a divine beast to appear in the world. In the end, not only could she not take it for herself, she even had to take its life. Shang Guanwan's hatred for Chu Luyue deepened. Dumpling seemed to be a little agitated. Chu Luyue patted its head gently and comforted it in her heart. When she discovered that Yang Qin might be colluding with Shang Guanwan, she had already expected this situation. Since Shang Guanwan dared to say these words so brazenly, it was obvious that she didn't intend to let her leave alive. But Shang Guanwan wanted her life. It wasn't that easy. I remember that you also have a Daijing Yuan meridian, and your grade isn't low? Shang Guanwan sized up Chu Luyue, her eyes filled with undisguised greed and excitement. Now, she only needed a little bit of strength to completely restore her Yuan meridian. Maybe Chu Luyue could complete it. After all, Chu Luyue's strength had always been much stronger than the realm she displayed. Plus, she had a divine beast. Chu Luyue smiled, but there was no smile in her eyes. It seems that the third princess is very interested in my Yuan meridian? Shang Guanwan couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. It's your honor to be able to serve me. Shang Guanwan raised her hand and waved it forward. A dark blue origin power flew out in an instant. It went straight for Chu Luyue. At the same time, countless tree roots flew over from all directions. Whoosh! Dumpling's body flashed, and she instantly transformed into her true form. She flapped her huge wings and scarlet flames surged out. All the tree roots were easily brushed away, and were tainted by the scarlet flames. In an instant, the flames soared into the sky. The surrounding darkness was dispelled. It was as bright as day. A violent wind blew. It was oppressive. Shang Guanwan clenched her fists tightly, and her heart was filled with hatred. Even though there was a barrier in front of her, she could still feel the terrifying power of the attacks. The power of a divine beast was so shocking. No wonder Chu Luyue was so bold. With this red-tailed phoenix, she didn't even need to do anything herself. The huge figure entrenched itself above Chu Luyue's head, carefully protecting her under its wings. The surrounding flames shone brightly on Chu Luyue's face and body. Shang Guanwan gritted her teeth and glared at her. Chu Luyue's expression was indifferent. When she met Shang Guanwan's resentful and jealous gaze, she suddenly smiled. Shang Guanwan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. That smile, those eyes, that expression. It was very similar to the person who was wrapped in flames in the Imperial Ancestral Hall that day. Shang Guanwan unconsciously took half a step back, extremely shocked. You, who exactly are you? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 739. Everything was like the scene from that day. It was like a nightmare. Shang Guanwan's body was trembling and her face was pale. Chu Luiyue smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. Me? I'm Chu Luiyue. How can third princess not recognize me? Her tone was light, as if she was teasing her. Shang Guanwan took a deep breath and kept telling herself in her heart that this was Chu Luiyue. This was Chu Luiyue. But the firelight reflected on her beautiful face, making it half bright and half dark. It was very similar to Shang Guanyu. Chu Luiyue took a step forward and seemed a little worried. Third princess, what's wrong? Don't come over. Don't come over. Shang Guanwan screamed. At the same time, she hurriedly stepped back and accidentally fell to the ground. Chu Luiyue stopped and stood there, quietly looking at Shang Guanwan with a smile. For a moment, she seemed to be high and mighty. Shang Guanwan looked at Chu Luiyue, her heart beating wildly. Chu Luiyue stood there and looked down at her, as if she had done it countless times. Shang Guanwan's face burned. It was too embarrassing for her to be in such a sorry state. Chu Luiyue was Chu Luiyue. Who else could she be? No one knew better than her that Shang Guanyu was dead. He was completely and utterly dead. There was no chance of her coming back to life. An illusion. These were all illusions. Shang Guanwan forced herself to stand up. The way she looked at Chu Luiyue gradually became fierce. Even if Chu Luiyue didn't discover all this today and didn't barge in, she definitely wouldn't let her stay for long. Her face alone was enough to kill her 10,000 times. Yes, Chu Luiyue. You're Chu Luiyue. Shang Guanwan said hatefully. No one knew who she was repeating it to. Chu Luiyue looked at her with interest. Shang Guanwan's reaction was really interesting. Chu Luiyue originally thought that Shang Guanwan was full of hatred for her, and would be very happy after killing her back then. But now, it wasn't that she wasn't guilty and afraid. Chu Luiyue was suddenly curious. If Shang Guanwan knew that she was really Shang Guanyu, what would her expression be? No matter who you are, you deserve to die. Shang Guanwan's heart was filled with anger and fear. Even though she kept convincing herself in her heart that this person was Chu Luiyue. However, countless scenes from the past appeared in the past. The intense emotions caused her facial features to distort. A black aura was faintly discernible between her brows, and there was a faint green light in her eyes. From afar, she looked like a malicious spirit. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Just now, she was a little puzzled. When did Shang Guanwan's force turn green? She didn't expect that there would be flames of the same color dancing in her eyes now. It looked very strange. Could it be that she had used a special method to devour other people's yuan meridians? Shang Guanwan attacked again. This time, she used almost all of her strength. The berserk power carried a terrifying pressure as it came crashing down. The space around Chu Luiyue was instantly compressed. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on her body. And even the flow of the force in her body slowed down. At this moment, Shang Guanwan's strength had definitely reached rank 8. Although Chu Luiyue had already broken through to rank 5, there was still a huge gap between her and Shang Guanwan. Dumpling let out a clear cry. Screech. A ball of red flames instantly condensed into a barrier, protecting Chu Luiyue in the middle. At the same time, it flapped its wings and several feathers flew out. They were like sharp swords that pierced towards Shang Guanwan. Thud thud thud. The feathers that emitted a gorgeous glow and carried a powerful aura, fiercely hitting the black barrier in front of Shang Guanwan. The black barrier trembled. Shang Guanwan gritted her teeth. It would be difficult to devour Chu Luiyue's power in a short period of time. That crimson gold pill phoenix by her side was seriously too powerful. The most important thing for her now was to recover her yuan meridian. She asked in her heart. Senior, do you have a way to deal with that divine beast? After a moment, a hoarse voice lazily sounded. I can help you stall that red gold phoenix for half an hour. Whether you can kill Chu Luiyue or not will depend on your ability. Thank you, Senior. Shang Guanwan was overjoyed. As long as there was no interference from that divine beast, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to deal with Chu Luiyue? Not to mention half an hour, she could take Chu Luiyue's life with a single move. Then, a black rune appeared between Shangguan Wan's brows. Then it floated out. A cold aura spread out from it. It quietly passed through the barrier and drew an arc in the air. Chu Luiyue looked at it and suddenly felt a chill in her heart. The force that forcefully dragged her over just now seemed to be exactly the same as the aura of this rune. Could it be that this was the mysterious existence that was secretly helping Shangguan Wan? A sense of uneasiness suddenly welled up in her heart. This rune was definitely more difficult to deal with than Shangguan Wan. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiyue saw that the rune had already flown towards Dumpling. Several black lines floated out from the surface of the sword. Those lines were even thinner than a strand of hair. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to detect it at all. Tuanzi's body burned with red flames in an instant. Her pair of dazzling crystal-like eyes were also shining brightly. However, when the flames touched the black lines, they actually didn't burn. The black lines passed through the flames and quickly outlined a huge net. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened and immediately wanted Dumpling to retreat. However, it was already too late. That huge net directly trapped Dumpling. At the same time, Shangguan Wan rushed over. She threw a simple and direct punch. Die. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 740. Just as Chu Luiyue and Shangguan Wan were in an intense battle, the people left behind were also very anxious. Yang Qin'er's sudden self-destruction caught everyone off guard. By the time they reacted, Chu Luiyue's figure had already disappeared. The only thing left on the battlefield was the violent aftermath of the explosion. Lei Laosi stared at the empty space, feeling angry and regretful as his chest heaved up and down. Her Highness was right in front of me, yet I actually couldn't protect her well. She could only watch helplessly as she was dragged into the void. 2 years ago, we weren't by Her Highness's side, which gave those people a chance. But now, the blood in Lei Laosi's body surged as he raised his hand, wanting to slap himself. Laosi, Qin Yi, who was standing beside him, suddenly spoke. Lei Laosi's raised hand instantly stopped in midair. He looked up and saw his big brother looking at him with a calm expression and a hint of warning in his eyes. If we overreact now, we'll definitely be suspected by others. Jiang Yuqing, Mu Qinghe, and the rest are still watching from behind. Qin Yi's silent warning made Lei Laosi come to his senses. He clenched his teeth and put his hand back, but his fists were tightly clenched, and the veins on his forehead were faintly visible. What happened just now? Jiang Yuqing hurriedly walked over with a cold and stern expression. Qin Yi turned around with a calm expression. Yang Qin'er self-destructed and tore open the empty space. The mastermind also forcefully dragged her away. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly. This means that there's indeed something wrong with Yang Qin'er? Who exactly is the mastermind behind this? Qin Yi shook his head and looked at Song Qingnian. Song Qingnian instantly looked like he was scalded. Why are you looking at me? What do you mean by that gaze? Yang Qin'er is from the Purple Shao Sword sect, and she's very close to you, young Master Song. Now that something happened to her, don't you have anything to say? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every single word was extremely sharp. It directly raised Song Qingnian's suspicion to the highest level. The surrounding people all looked over suspiciously. That's right. Everyone had clearly seen how Song Qingnian had protected Yang Qin'er with all his might just now. Did he not know that there was something wrong with Yang Qin'er? Song Qingnian said angrily. What can I say? I don't know anything. Initially, he wanted to defend Yang Qin'er, but in this situation, any words would be useless. Yang Qin'er had chosen to self-destruct. If this wasn't a guilty conscience, then what was? Coupled with her strange wound from before, even Song Qingnian was well aware that she must be hiding something. The person was already dead, and the most important thing now was to clear himself of suspicion. Oh, you were so close to her. Do you really not know anything about what she said or did? Qin Yi asked. Song Qingnian felt extremely aggrieved. I really don't know. Even if I ask you 100 times, you still don't know. How long had Yang Qin'er been in the Purple Shao Sword sect? He was also attracted to her because she was beautiful and gentle, which was why he got close to her. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? Qingnian, I believe that this matter has nothing to do with you, but any clues are very important now. If there's anything wrong with her, feel free to tell me if you know anything. The person who said this was Jiang Yuqing. Song Qingnian looked at him in disbelief. This means, Jiang Yuqing is clearly suspicious of me. Just as he was about to refute, he saw Jiang Yuqing's serious expression, as if he was very concerned about this matter. No, he was clearly concerned about Chu Luiyue. Song Qingnian had some understanding of Jiang Yuqing. Seeing his reaction, he could basically guess what he was thinking, and could not help but be secretly shocked. Mu Qinghe, who was at the side, glanced at Jiang Yuqing without batting an eyelid. Jiang Yuqing looked gentle and polite, but he was actually cold-hearted and ruthless. The person he valued the most was himself. Shang Guanwan had been missing for so long, but he had never been so anxious. Chu Luiyue just disappeared, yet he already couldn't hold it in. Mu Qinghe looked down and suppressed the guess in her heart. I'm afraid that Jiang Yuqing himself hasn't noticed this, right? I really don't know anything. If I knew, why would I waste so much effort to save her just now? Why would I speak up for her? Song Qingnian defended himself. Nothing could be seen from Jiang Yuqing's expression, but his eyes were deep and obscure. It seems like I really can't get anything out of Song Qingnian. He looked at Qini again. Young Master Qin, do you have a way to find her current location? The moment he said that, he heard footsteps behind him. I know where she is. The cold and indifferent voice of a youth sounded. The surroundings fell silent. Qini looked at the golden-haired youth standing in front of him. His expression was cold, and his lips were slightly pursed. Only his eyes were filled with determination. Qini narrowed his eyes. Chang Wanzhou continued. I'll bring you to save her. Qini gave a half-smile. Why me? Because you're the strongest. You can help her. Chang Wanzhou stared at him fixedly. He didn't say the remaining half of his sentence. It's also because Chu Luiyue trusts Qin Yi. He could clearly see that Chu Luiyue trusted Qin Yi and Lei Laosi a lot. Even though he didn't know why, he trusted her. Qin Yi paused and nodded. Okay. Jiang Yuqing immediately asked, why? Then where exactly is she? The moment he asked that, Jiang Yuqing realized that he was too anxious. His expression changed and he added, if we go together, we'll go together. The chances of success will be higher. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran had already followed them, and seemed to want to go together. Chang Wanzhou glanced at Jiang Yuqing, and slowly swept his gaze across the crowd. She's very far from here. If too many people go, it will only drag down the speed. Jiang Yuqing's face was a little ugly. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran originally wanted to go, but they hesitated when they heard that. Then, you guys go first. It's more important to save Luyu first. Don't worry about us. Even though Mu Hongyu was also very worried, she still said that. She had a faint yuan body, and could teleport, so it was actually more convenient for her compared to the others. However, she wasn't sure if her current skills were enough. It wouldn't be good if she became everyone's burden when she went there. Yi Ranran also nodded seriously. Big brother Qin, you guys go first. Since they already said that, the others couldn't say anything else. Qini raised his hand and gently waved it, tearing open space. Then he stepped in. Chang Wanzhou followed closely behind. Lei Laosi was about to follow when Qini glanced at him and lightly shook his head. Protect them well. After that, the two of them completely disappeared. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and fell into deep thought. If Chu Luiyue was really taken away by Shangguanwan just now, I actually know the location. Digression. Continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 741. Jiang Yuqing was very conflicted, as if there were two of him arguing in his mind. On one hand, if Shangguanwan really did all this, she definitely wouldn't leave Chu Luiyue alive. Even if Qin Yi and the rest went over, they might not be able to save Chu Luiyue. On the other hand, Chu Luiyue probably already knew something. If she made it out of here alive, she would undoubtedly be a huge hidden danger to Shang Guanwan. She might even implicate me. After all, I'm in the same boat as Shang Guanwan. If Chu Luyue exposed what Shang Guanwan did, our marriage would definitely be ruined. Shang Guanwan, together with him, would suffer a disastrous fall in status. There were already many people in Shilling City who hated him. Once he lost his power, it went without saying what awaited him. After thinking for a long time, Jiang Yuqing's gaze gradually turned cold. At this point, Chu Luyue and Shang Guanwan didn't know what was happening in another place. Shang Guanwan threw a punch. This punch was extremely simple and clean. There weren't any fancy moves, and only an extremely domineering force. A ghostly green fist shadow flew out, silently tearing through space. It drew a perfect arc in midair. Finally, it went straight for Chu Luyue's face. The space in front of Chu Luyue was harshly squeezed. Under this valiant suppression, Chu Luyue felt as if something heavy was pressing down on every part of her body, and it was extremely painful and unbearable. Her entire body seemed to have been frozen, and even moving became extremely difficult. A Stage 8 warrior's all-out attack. Even Chu Luyue wouldn't be able to face it head-on. Chu Luyue's eyes flashed with coldness as she watched the rapidly approaching fist shadows. Buzz! The water droplet in her dantian suddenly started spinning. Boundless energy surged out and instantly filled her limbs and bones. With the support of this power, the pressure on Chu Luyue was greatly reduced. With a slight movement of her feet, she disappeared from the spot. The shadow of the fist missed. Shang Guanwan narrowed her eyes and sneered. You do have some skills. Chu Luyue's aura was clearly much stronger than before. From the looks of it, she indeed had a trump card that could not be underestimated. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to dodge her full-force attack so easily. No wonder Chu Luyue was able to obtain first place in the previous competitions. Shang Guanwan's heart was filled with disdain. You want to rely on this little bit of strength to escape today? I'm afraid you're too naive. No matter how many tricks he had, they were all jokes in the face of absolute power. An idea popped up in Shang Guanwan's mind, and the fist shadow suddenly changed its direction and continued charging toward Chu Luyue. However, at this moment, a silver ray of light flew out from Chu Luyue's hand. Shang Guanwan narrowed her eyes and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that it was the dagger that Chu Luyue had used before. She raised the corner of her mouth in a mocking smile. You want to rely on this thing to break this consort's attack? What a joke! As the saying goes, an inch longer is an inch stronger. A handy yuan instrument could often increase a cultivator's combat power. However, Chu Luyue seemed to have always used this dagger. No matter how sharp and useful this dagger was, it was still easily inferior to swords, spears, swords, and halberds. Therefore, from Shang Guanwan's point of view, Chu Luyue's insistence on using this dagger was just asking for trouble. However, in the next second, her complacent and disdainful smile froze on her face. This was because Chu Luyue's dagger had harshly split her fist shadow in half. It was extremely fast. The fist shadow's power did not seem to be of any use, as it was torn apart just like that. The condensed power instantly dissipated. Chu Luyue had already retreated and set up a barrier in front of him, blocking the violent energy outside. Shang Guanwan was both shocked and furious. The dagger in Chu Luyue's hand, there was clearly something wrong with it. Perhaps, it's also a rare treasure. No wonder she never let it go. If it were any other time, Shang Guanwan might have some interest in that dagger. However, at this moment, her heart was filled with thoughts of killing Chu Luyue as soon as possible. Since her first attack had failed, she quickly made another move. This time, she was much more serious. Her figure flashed, and she rushed in front of Chu Luyue. Although Chu Luyue was fast, he was not as fast as Shang Guanwan, who was moving at full speed. Moreover, under such circumstances, she did not intend to continue hiding. Shang Guanwan's hands formed a seal in front of her. The dark green force surged out one after another, and formed a palm print in front of Shang Guanwan. This palm print was about the size of her hand, and emitted a sparkling glow. The surrounding power began to gather towards this palm print. Chu Luyue narrowed his eyes. She was too familiar with this move that Shang Guanwan used. This was because this was a palm technique that only the disciples of the Tianling dynasty's royal family could cultivate. Ling Xiao palm. Most importantly, although this was an earth rank martial skill, the power that it could unleash was enough to reach the heaven rank. Shang Guanwan's hands paused, and then she changed her posture slightly. The surrounding energy began to surge towards the palm print even more violently. Chu Luiyue sneered in his heart. The Ling Xiao palm was divided into 3 levels. The first level was something that all the disciples of the royal family could cultivate, but the second level required the cultivator's strength to reach the 7th rank before they were qualified to continue cultivating. This requirement might be a little high for ordinary people. But for the disciples of the Tianling royal family, it was not difficult. However, not everyone was able to successfully cultivate the second level. Because the Ling Xiao palm was obscure and difficult to understand, many people were unable to enter the second level. As for the third level, it could only be continued after reaching the 8th rank. Although the current Shang Guanwan had barely reached the 8th rank, her Yuan meridian was damaged, and it was impossible for her to continue studying it. Therefore, she only displayed the strength of the second level. However, in her opinion, this was enough to deal with Chu Luiyue. To be able to make me use the second level of the Ling Xiao palm, you can be considered to have died a worthy death. Chu Luiyue's expression was cold, and a mocking smile flashed across the corner of her mouth. Speaking of which, Shang Guanwan could not learn the second level no matter how hard she tried. She had to secretly beg her and learn from her. At that time, Shang Guanwan finally succeeded in cultivating it after her patient guidance. She was overjoyed and tactfully said that she hoped to give her father a surprise. How could Shang Guanyu not know what she meant back then? However, she did not mind, and took the initiative to say that she would not reveal this matter. To outsiders, she would only say that Shang Guanwan had comprehended it herself. After the news spread, many people praised Shang Guanwan for her intelligence. Even her father's attitude towards Shang Guanwan was much gentler. He said that he could not tell when she was young, but she had become smarter as she grew older. Chu Luiyue's hand moved slightly in her sleeve. Since she was the one who taught her back then, it was time for her to return it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 742. Chu Luiyue held his breath and concentrated. The force in his body quickly surged toward his right hand. A starlight suddenly lit up on his fingertip. Soon, the starlight separated and floated to the finger beside him. In the blink of an eye, all 3 fingers on Chu Luiyue's right hand had lit up. But it did not stop. The 4th starlight appeared shakily. Although it looked a little weaker than the previous 3, it still appeared. The surrounding energy surged, as if it wanted to rush over. However, Chu Luiyue waved his other hand gently and repelled all the dirty energy. Shang Guanwan might not mind. She might even be happy to devour the surrounding energy. She could not dislike. It was too dirty. Therefore, Chu Luiyue simply continued to mobilize the energy in his body. The water droplets spun quickly. The 5 patterns fluctuated, and the majestic force continuously surged toward Chu Luiyue. Sensing that Chu Luiyue had isolated the surrounding energy, but his aura was still rising rapidly, Shang Guanwan's expression changed slightly. How did he do it? Could it be that Chu Luiyue had other trump cards? This momentary distraction caused the energy that Shang Guanwan was gathering to become chaotic for a moment. She quickly focused and stabilized it with great difficulty. Seeing that the green palm print had finally returned to normal, Shang Guanwan closed her eyes. She felt somewhat sullen. It was true that she had learned the second level, but a large part of it was actually copied from Shang Guanyu. Because she did not fully comprehend it, she had to follow every step that Shang Guanyu had taught her when she used this move. If there were any mistakes in the process, all her efforts would be for naught. On one hand, Shang Guanwan was proud that she could cultivate to the second level. On the other hand, she was trapped because she could not use it freely. Every time she used the move, she would be greatly restricted. Moreover, every time she used it, she would inevitably think of Shang Guanyu. For this reason, Shang Guanwan would not use this move under normal circumstances. However, he needed to end the battle quickly, so this was the best choice. Lines glowing faintly appeared on the palm. From afar, they looked like palm prints. The finer the palm print was, the stronger the power it contained. Different cultivators had different insights and understandings of this move, so the palm lines they drew were also different. However, Shangguan learned it from Shangguan, so her palm prints were very similar to hers. However, it was much simpler than Shangguan. When Shangguan finished the last stroke, the fifth star quietly appeared on Chu Liyue's fingertips. Chu Liyue looked up, and her gaze lingered on Shangguan's palm print for a moment. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. After such a long time, Shangguan's cultivation of the Lingxiao palm did not improve at all. Well, her Yuan meridian was destroyed, so she could not even compare to ordinary cultivators. How could she still comprehend the Lingxiao palm? It must have been hard for her to memorize these little by little, not daring to forget them. Chu Liyue raised her hand gently. 5 stars shone brightly. She had already memorized the stupefying god art by heart. Therefore, after breaking through to the 5th stage, she naturally comprehended the stupefying god art. Now, because the force in her body was much more abundant, she could finally light up all 5 stars. You think you can compete with my palm technique? Shangguan sneered. She cultivated the martial technique of the Tianling dynasty, which had been passed down for thousands of years. How could Chu Liyue compare to it? Chu Liyue did not seem to hear her, and gently pushed her palm forward. A silver palm print floated in the air. The light was bright but not dazzling. However, the surrounding space started to collapse silently, and a circle of black appeared. The palm print floated there quietly, but it contained a pressure that could not be underestimated. Shangguan's expression changed slightly. Chu Liyue's move seemed to be an earth stage martial technique. She frowned and scolded herself for thinking too much. Even if it was an earth stage martial technique, Chu Liyue was so much weaker than her. She could not compete with her. With a thought, she pushed the palm print out. Lingxiao palm. The dark green palm print flew forward noiselessly. At the same time, Chu Liyue's silver palm print also started to move. She actually chose to fight head-on with Shangguan. You overestimate yourself. Shangguan sneered disdainfully. The 2 palm prints quickly approached each other. Before they even touched, the power of both sides began to fight crazily. The space between the 2 shattered one after another. Crack. Even a crack had appeared on the stone platform below. A dark green light flashed through the crack. Shangguan did not notice this. Chu Liyue seemed to have sensed something and suddenly stared at the crack. It seemed something was wrong. It was an intuition. Even if there seemed to be no problem now, she still felt a faint sense of uneasiness in her heart. Suddenly, there was a fluctuation in front of her. Chu Liyue quickly looked up. After a fierce battle, the power of the Jingxin palm was gradually devoured, and it began to slowly retreat. On the other hand, although Shangguan's Lingxiao palm consumed a lot of power, because her level was much higher than Chu Liyue's, the power contained in her palm was also more abundant. At a glance, the Lingxiao palm was gradually gaining the upper hand. Shangguan spurred on. Go! The Lingxiao palm was quickly approaching. It seemed that she intended to completely devour the Jingxin palm. At this moment, the Jingxin palm suddenly exploded. Countless starlight scattered. Shangguan thought that she had won this time. Just as a smug smile appeared on her face, she saw that the starlight did not dissipate. Instead, it burst out with a dazzling light. For a moment, the light was dazzling. The dazzling light illuminated the place as if it was daytime. Sizzle! When the light surrounded the Lingxiao palm, there was a burst of ear-piercing sound at the edge. It sounded like something was being burned crazily. The palm print began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. An unpleasant smell quickly spread out. Shangguan was shocked and could not believe what she saw. How was this possible? Chu Liyue was only a stage 5 warrior. How could her palm technique have such terrifying power? But at this moment, Chu Liyue suddenly moved. Her 2 hands formed a strange gesture in front of her. Shangguan took a look and felt that the gesture was somewhat familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen it before. Then, Chu Liyue raised her hand and gently drew in the air. The starlight in the sky surged. Soon it formed a pattern. Shang Guanwan stared at it closely, afraid that she would miss something. Chu Liuyue's movements were very slow, so Shang Guanwan could see it very clearly. She even unconsciously sketched it in her mind. Slowly, she finally realized that something was wrong. The pattern drawn by Chu Liyue was gradually overlapping with the palm print pattern of the second level of the Lingxiao palm. Digression. Don't ask. If you ask, it means that the sixth watch is at 6:30. If you ask again, you will be procrastinating. Cough. Slipping away. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 743. The patterns drawn by Chu Liyue were actually completely different from the palm prints. However, for some reason, they were inexplicably compatible and gradually intertwined with each other. Shang Guanwan had a bad feeling and immediately looked away, trying to clear her mind of the mess. She had painstakingly memorized the palm prints, so there must not be any deviation. Even so, it did not seem to be of much use. Just now, she had been looking at it for quite a while, and she had been looking at it very seriously. She had clearly memorized all of Chu Liyue's movements, including the vein patterns. And now, those patterns were deeply engraved in her mind, and she could not get rid of them even if she wanted to. Gradually, Shang Guanwan realized that her memory of the second level of the Lingxiao palm was starting to become chaotic. The two diagrams slowly intersected, and very soon, it became a mess. This situation was too strange. Shang Guanwan had cultivated for many years, but she had never encountered such a situation before. She had painstakingly learned the Lingxiao palm back then, and she had put in a lot of effort to learn it. In order to win a word of praise from her imperial father, and to make everyone look at her in a new light, she did not hesitate to secretly ask Shang Guanyu for help. Because Shang Guanyu's understanding of the Lingxiao palm was more thorough and detailed than hers, the Lingxiao palm that the two of them executed was different. Even if she had learned it according to Shang Guanyu's palm prints, if an ordinary person did not look carefully, they would not notice any problems. Moreover, Shang Guanwan had always been very careful and rarely used this move in front of others. This was originally a move that she had been thinking about for a long time, and it was almost engraved in her bones and blood. It was not that she had never fought with others before, but it had never been like this. The more anxious Shang Guanwan was, the more confused her mind became. Even the green palm print was affected, and the patterns on the palm started to become chaotic. This chaos caused the power of the Lingxiao palm to decrease greatly. Chu Liyue glanced at Shang Guanwan indifferently. Shang Guanwan had already turned her gaze away, trying not to look at them. She held her head with both hands, looking conflicted and pained. As if she had sensed Chu Liyue's gaze, she suddenly raised her head and screamed, "Chu Liyue, what kind of trick are you playing?" Chu Liyue chuckled, but his hands didn't stop moving. The pattern in front of him seemed casual, but it had a strong regularity to it. Ordinary people wouldn't feel much when they saw this pattern. At most, they would feel dizzy after looking at it for a long time. But Shang Guanwan was different. As long as she saw it, she would never forget it, because this pattern was the third level of the Lingxiao palm. Back then, after Chu Liyue broke through to the 8th rank, he began to cultivate the last level of the Lingxiao palm. Her comprehension ability was extremely high, and it did not take her long to completely comprehend it. But no one knew about it except herself. Even his father, the emperor, knew nothing about this. At that time, she just did it as a matter of course and did not think of announcing it to show off. After all, she was already the most noble existence. Naturally, she did not need to use such a method to prove her excellence like Shang Guanwan. And now, this had given her a lot of convenience. Because he was worried about exposing his identity, Chu Liyue had not used any of the martial arts skills he knew since his rebirth. If not for Shang Guanwan's move today, Chu Liyue would not have thought of using this move to deal with her. The cultivation of the Lingxiao palm was divided into 3 levels. Each level was a summary and transcendence of the previous level, and the 3rd level was even more so. Shang Guanwan had cultivated the 2nd level, and the palm print had already left a deep imprint in her heart. Now, as long as she saw the patterns on the third level, she would involuntarily start to cultivate according to this level. But she didn't even comprehend the second level, let alone the third level. After looking at it, the only result was that this part of Shang Guanwan's cultivation was completely disintegrated. Shang Guanwan herself must have realized that something was wrong, which was why she was so flustered and exasperated. Unfortunately, it was too late. Chu Luiyue did not say a word, and only continued to outline the remaining patterns. When Shang Guanwan raised her head and accidentally saw it, she only felt as if someone had taken a knife and forcefully carved this pattern in her mind. Ah! Sensing that the impression in her mind was becoming more and more chaotic, Shang Guanwan finally couldn't take it anymore and screamed. Then, she rushed toward Chu Luiyue with scarlet eyes. Slut! Trying to mystify in front of this consort. You're courting death. Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed dangerously. He hooked his finger lightly and added the last pattern. Finally he stopped. Shang Guanwan was getting closer and closer. She was about to charge over. Chu Luiyue pulled with both hands. That huge pattern instantly floated over. Shang Guanwan only saw a flash in front of her eyes. That strange pattern appeared in front of her again. Chu Luiyue spoke softly, as if he was guiding her, but also as if he was ruling. Let's see how your Lingxiao palm is like. As soon as he finished speaking, Shang Guanwan's mind exploded. Lingxiao palm. Crack. In an instant, it was as if something had suddenly broken. As if out of control, the two patterns in her mind were completely mixed together. The second layer of palm lines, which was deeply imprinted like a brand, instantly shattered and dissipated. Shang Guanwan's body trembled, and she violently spat out a mouthful of blood. She clearly felt as if something was rapidly flowing out of her body. Lingxiao palm, Lingxiao palm. Shang Guanwan raised her eyes with difficulty and looked at the shattered palm print, only to see that the palm lines on it had completely shattered. Chu Luiyue's eyes were cold and sharp. He formed a whip with his force and viciously lashed it out. Smack! That ghostly green palm print collapsed along with it. What she could give Shang Guanwan back then, she could take away today. Lingxiao palm? She didn't deserve it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 744. Shang Guanwan let out a shrill cry as she hugged her head in extreme pain. She frantically wanted to keep all the memories of the Lingxiao palm in her mind. However, everything was like sand in her hands. The more she tried to salvage it, the more futile her efforts were. Previously, her mind was in a mess, but now, it gradually became blank. No. I learned the Lingxiao palm with much difficulty. How can I forget it just like that? Once I fall to the second stage today, it will be harder than ascending to heaven if I want to cultivate it again in the future. Shang Guanwan panicked as she panted heavily. One of her hands unconsciously tugged at her hair, causing strands of hair to fall. However, Shang Guanwan could no longer care about it. The strange pattern that Chu Luiyue drew forcefully destroyed the Lingxiao palm in her mind. It was as if it was effortless. When the last pattern completely disappeared, Shang Guanwan's actions finally slowed down. It's gone, it's really gone. I really fell to the second stage of the Lingxiao palm. No matter how hard I tried to recall, there was nothing in my mind. When I thought about it for a long time, I would even feel a sharp pain. Shang Guanwan weakly took 2 steps back. Her legs turned to jelly, and she almost fell to the ground. Chu Luiyue gently exhaled, and his back was drenched in sweat. Actually, with her current Stage 5 warrior abilities, it was very difficult for her to execute the third stage of the Lingxiao palm. Even just drawing the pattern had used up a lot of her force. Without the support of the water droplet in her dantian, she definitely wouldn't have been able to do this. This attack seemed very simple, but it had actually used up more than half of her body's strength. However, the good thing was that the effect was not bad. It seems like your so-called Lingxiao palm isn't very good. Chu Luiyue spoke softly with a smile on his lips. When Shang Guanwan heard this voice, it was as if she suddenly realized something as she suddenly looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her face was filled with resentment. Chu Luiyue, Shang Guanwan called out Chu Liyue's name word by word. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between her teeth. His tone was filled with deep resentment, as if he wanted nothing more than to drink his blood and eat his flesh. He had thought that he could easily get rid of Chu Liyue, but he had not expected to suffer a double loss. There was something wrong with Chu Liyue. The move she used just now was a despicable move that he didn't know where she learned it from. Shang Guanwan couldn't figure it out, but she didn't want to continue investigating. There was only one thought in her mind right now: to kill Chu Liyue. If Chu Liyue was not dealt with today, there would be no end of trouble in the future. Although she didn't like Chu Liyue before, she didn't take Chu Liyue seriously at all. But today, Shang Guanwan finally realized that Chu Liyue was much harder to deal with than she had expected. Anger and resentment surged in her heart, almost bursting out of Shang Guanwan's chest. Her intense emotions made her crazy, and her facial features were slightly distorted. In the depths of her eyes, a dark green fire could be vaguely seen. It looked like a ferocious ghost. Shoo! At this point, a clear cry was heard. Shang Guanwan was shocked. She turned around and saw that the crimson gold phoenix had already broken free from the black net and was angrily rushing out. It was heading straight for her. The red fire surged, and the entire space instantly turned into a sea of fire. The crimson gold phoenix's crystal-like eyes flashed with extremely cold, murderous intent. Shang Guanwan's entire body turned cold. It was as if she was instantly surrounded by the Grim Reaper. Danger! She hurriedly got up and ran away without thinking. But the moment she turned around, a fire suddenly attacked her. Poof! Shang Guanwan was shocked. She hurriedly dodged and accidentally fell to the ground. Lowering her head, she saw that her skirt was already stained with the red fire. She hurriedly extinguished the fire. However, Dumpling had the intention to kill this time. How could she let her off so easily? The surrounding flames burned crazily, and from all directions, they rushed towards Shang Guanwan to kill her. In a moment of desperation, Shang Guanwan hurriedly set up a barrier around her. At the same time, she ran towards the crimson gold armor that was thrown on the ground. Even if the crimson gold armor had not officially recognized her as its owner, when she wore it, it would still be able to provide some defense. Shang Guanwan was forced to the point that she had no other choice. In a state of panic, she could only think of these methods to deal with it. But just as she was about to reach the crimson gold armor, a terrifying aura suddenly attacked from the side. Shang Guanwan was stunned, and a trace of fear surged in her heart. Suddenly, a black rune appeared in the void, blocking in front of Shang Guanwan. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely. Chu Liyue's pupils constricted. The fireball formed by the red flames was actually completely blocked by the black rune. With the help of the black rune, Shang Guanwan successfully put on the crimson gold armor again. Touching the cold and hard armor, Shang Guanwan's heart calmed down. Chu Liyue stared at the black rune and narrowed his eyes. This was Shang Guanwan's true backing. Shang Guanwan was protected by the barrier and finally had time to breathe. She said in her heart, "Thank you, Senior." However, the other party only replied coldly, "Useless thing." Shang Guanwan was reprimanded, but she didn't dare to refute. She didn't even dare to show a trace of dissatisfaction. She didn't expect that she would be forced to such a state by a mere Chu Liyue. Senior is right. It's all this junior's fault for underestimating the enemy. Even if you use your full strength, I'm afraid the situation won't be any better than now, right? That hoarse voice had a hint of mockery. Don't forget, you're now a trash who hasn't even recovered your Yuan Meridian. Shang Guanwan might be able to gain the upper hand in the first few moves, but as time passed, she wouldn't be able to hold on. In the end, wasn't she still being beaten up by Chu Liyue? Shang Guanwan bit her lips angrily, and a trace of blood seeped out of her lips. However, her lips and teeth were already full of blood. This was not worth mentioning at all. In the end, I still have to do it personally, that voice said coldly. Shang Guanwan was shocked and felt complicated. Senior, buzz. A strange buzz could be heard all of a sudden. Then, the black rune slowly flew to Shang Guanwan's glabella. This time, the edge of the black rune seemed to be burning with flames and curled slightly. Before Shang Guanwan could speak, there was a subtle change in her expression. Her expression quickly faded away, leaving only indifference and coldness. Her eyes also became even more scarlet. Her entire body was filled with a monstrous murderous aura. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Dumpling. Hearing her call, Dumpling, who had intended to fight head-on, quickly flew back. The next moment, Shang Guanwan raised her hand and tapped lightly in the air. Boom! A violent gale spread out in all directions. The space around Chu Liyue quickly collapsed. Then, her body flew forward uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 745. Shang Guanwan's hand went straight for Chu Liyue's slender neck. It was as if with a slight twist, she could break this slender and fair neck and completely take away Chu Liyue's life. Chu Liyue's entire body was enveloped by a terrifying pressure, and she couldn't move. A murderous intent flashed across Dumpling's eyes, and she immediately chased after her. Shang Guanwan raised her eyes and looked at Dumpling expressionlessly. The huge net that she had just broken free from was once again blocking in front of her. Moreover, this net had clearly been repaired, and it was even more dense and difficult to deal with than before. Dumpling's speed slowed down. However, in this moment of slowing down, the distance between Chu Liyue and Shang Guanwan had rapidly shortened. Shang Guanwan's meticulously trimmed nails were about to scratch Chu Liyue's creamy skin. Suddenly, a vigorous aura erupted from Chu Liyue's body. Shang Guanwan's wooden expression finally cracked. She retreated in shock, but her eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. No wonder you're so arrogant. So you still have such a trump card. That aura just now was clearly above a 9th stage warrior. Chu Liyue's body actually hid such a strong warrior's strength. Although Shang Guanwan's voice didn't change, her tone was different from before, as if she had changed into a different person. Without her control and threat, Chu Liyue fell from the sky. When her feet stepped on the ground again, she let out a long breath in her heart and said gratefully, "Thank you, Taizu." She really didn't expect that Taizu would take the initiative to attack in that situation just now. Taizu didn't say anything, but he firmly protected Chu Liyue. Shang Guanwan looked at Chu Liyue suspiciously. Chu Liyue also looked up at the other side. This time, both sides fell into a short silence and stalemate. The air seemed to have condensed, and it was suffocating. On the surface, this was a duel between Shang Guanwan and Chu Liyue. But in reality, it was no longer. Suddenly, there was a fluctuation in the air. Shang Guanwan immediately turned her head to look. Her expression was cold. This scene must not be seen by anyone. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly heard a sound that was neither loud nor soft. Crack. It seemed like something had broken. Shang Guanwan looked down. A crack suddenly appeared in the middle of the stone platform. Chu Liyue also saw this scene. But in reality, she knew that this crack had been there for a long time. Crack. That crack was slowly but surely spreading in all directions, expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. The uneasiness in Chu Liyue's heart grew stronger. She quickly summoned Dumpling. Just as a hand touched Dumpling's neck, she saw a faint green light rush out from the crack. Then, the entire stone platform was filled with cracks. It began to collapse. At the same time, countless tree roots fell from above. They swept toward the two of them. Chu Liyue quickly jumped onto Dumpling's back. However, at that moment, the entire stone platform collapsed. The faint green light lit up the entire space. Then a terrifying suction force came from below. Shang Guanwan's feet were empty, and she fell straight down. She was about to be devoured. However, at that moment, she suddenly grabbed a tree root and shook it to Chu Liyue's side. She grabbed Chu Liyue's ankle. Chu Liyue wanted to defend, but she suddenly realized that she could not use the force around her. It was the same for Taizu's force. In that moment, Shang Guanwan grabbed Chu Liyue. Then she pulled fiercely. Everything happened too quickly. Before Chu Liyue could react, she was already forcefully pulled down. Chu Liyue raised her leg and kicked Shang Guanwan fiercely. Shang Guanwan's face immediately turned to the side from the kick. A few of her teeth also fell out. In her panic, she only had time to put on the pure gold sacred armor and forgot to put on the helmet. However, she quickly reacted. As long as Chu Luyue did not hurt her head or face, she could easily take down Chu Luyue. Enveloped by the faint green light, both of them could not use their force. They could only rely on their physical strength. Shang Guanwan's eyes were fierce. She grabbed Chu Luyue's ankle tightly and pushed hard. Chu Luyue fell. Dumpling flapped her wings and scratched Shang Guanwan's face fiercely. Her sharp claws instantly scratched Shang Guanwan's face. The few scratches were shocking. They were so deep that the bones could be seen. Shang Guanwan screamed, and was about to think of a way to retaliate when Dumpling quickly chased after Chu Luyue. Saving Master is more important. As for Shang Guanwan, when we meet again, I will definitely return the favor. Dumpling's figure followed closely behind Chu Luyue and disappeared into the dense faint green light below. Shang Guanwan hugged the tree root tightly, afraid that she would accidentally fall down. Who knows what's down there? At this moment, the air was torn apart. Two silhouettes walked out one after the other. It was Qin Yi and Chang Wanzhou. The black rune on Shang Guanwan's glabella instantly disappeared. The dazed expression on her face gradually faded, and she returned to her previous look filled with anger and resentment. She shuddered. Just now, was I being controlled by that person just now? She's right here. Chang Wanzhou was speaking when he suddenly saw the scene in front of him. Shock flashed across his eyes, and his voice stopped abruptly. Qin Yi reacted faster than him. When he saw the stage that was almost completely collapsing and the strange faint green light in the middle, he immediately realized that something was amiss. He quickened his steps and rushed over. In the end, he saw Shang Guanwan struggling to climb up. Other than her, there was no one else around. Chu Luyue isn't here. Qin Yi's gaze finally landed on the abyss below. Other than the blinding light, he couldn't see anything. He was just standing at the edge, but he felt like he was about to be swallowed. Where is she? Chang Wanzhou also followed over and stared at Shang Guanwan as he questioned her coldly. Shang Guanwan recognized the two of them and felt a chill in her heart. However, she still forced herself to say, "It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here. Hurry and save me." Chang Wanzhou's voice was even colder. "I'm asking you, where is she?" Shang Guanwan could only pretend that she didn't know. "What are you talking about? Who is she? I'm the only one here from start to end. Hurry and pull me up." She can't hold on for too long just by relying on her own strength. Someone must bring her out from the outside. Murderous intent appeared on Chang Wanzhou's face. "I can clearly feel Chu Luyue's aura here. She must have been here before." Looking at Shang Guanwan's haggard appearance, she clearly just went through an intense battle. Clang! Chang Wanzhou suddenly pulled out his sword. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. He held the cloud sky copper sword tightly in his hands. Then, he slashed at the tree root that Shang Guanwan was hugging. Since Shang Guanwan isn't willing to tell the truth, then, I'll just kill her. Digression. It's better to be together at 6 p.m. for the rest of the time. My 5-year-old computer is barely hanging on, and the exhaust fan is so hot that you can fry an egg on it. I brought it to be repaired. Mending for another 3 years. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 746. A piercing sword light flashed across. Shang Guanwan's heart skipped a beat. She watched as the cloud sky copper sword was about to cut that tree root. But just as it was about to touch it, Qin Yi suddenly pressed down on Chang Wanzhou's wrist. His actions were very light, as if he was just touching it lightly. However, Chang Wanzhou's actions instantly stopped. Anger was written all over Chang Wanzhou's beautiful face, as he gripped the sword hilt tightly with both hands, and increased his strength as he tried to resist. However, Qin Yi was simply too strong, and he suppressed Chang Wanzhou completely without batting an eyelid. The moment he put his hand down, Chang Wanzhou couldn't move at all. Realizing that he was indeed not Qin Yi's match, Chang Wanzhou looked up angrily. "I don't believe that Qin Yi can't tell what's going on here. Why did he stop me? It's not enough even if Shang Guanwan dies 10,000 times." Qin Yi's expression had already regained its calmness, and his long and narrow eyes were filled with darkness. "We haven't made things clear yet, so don't jump to conclusions." Then, He looked at Shang Guanwan with a gentle expression. We'll save you first. Shang Guanwan was elated as she nodded profusely. After Qini said that, he actually waved his sleeves and threw out a rope that wrapped around Shang Guanwan's waist. With a light flick of his wrist, Shang Guanwan was pulled up. After leaving the area enveloped by the dark green light, Shang Guanwan instantly felt as if she had crawled up from hell. She turned around to take a look with lingering fear, and her entire body was drenched in cold sweat. If I didn't grab that tree root just now and wasn't careful, I would have been the one falling down. Coincidentally, there was another ripple in the air at this moment. A figure walked out from within. Shang Guanwan turned around and was instantly shocked. The person who came was actually Jiang Yuqing. Yuqing! Exclaimed Shang Guanwan as she hurriedly ran over and pounced into his arms. Yuqing! You are finally here. Jiang Yuqing didn't notice it for a moment and was thrown into his arms. He subconsciously put his arms around Shang Guanwan's waist. Shang Guanwan cried in his arms. I was so scared. I almost died for a long time. Yuqing, did you specially come here to look for me? Jiang Yuqing knew where she was. Since he had appeared now, he must be here for her. Shang Guanwan had been through those things before, so she had accumulated a lot of emotions. At this time, seeing Jiang Yuqing, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out. Fear, anxiety. In this short period of time, she had experienced several life and death situations in succession, and her mental state had been extremely tense. Now he could finally relax a little. The front of Jiang Yuqing's shirt was soon soaked by Shang Guanwan's tears. Her arms were tightly wrapped around him, and her body was still trembling slightly. It was obvious that she was extremely scared. Even Jiang Yuqing rarely saw her like this. As he softly comforted her, he gently patted her shoulders. It's fine. Aren't I here now? Don't worry. When Chang Wanzhou saw Jiang Yuqing, who suddenly appeared, he pressed his lips together and glanced at Qini. It turns out that he already sensed someone coming. Furthermore, this person is Jiang Yuqing. It's not hard to imagine what the outcome would be if Jiang Yuqing came and saw me planning to kill Shang Guanwan. But even so, what about Chu Luiyue? Chang Wanzhou looked at the deep abyss in the middle and held the cloud sky copper sword in his hands tightly. Jiang Yuqing hugged Shang Guanwan and comforted her, but his gaze was darting around as if he was looking for someone. In between his brows, there was a tinge of undetectable worry. Qini saw it clearly and couldn't help but laugh in his heart as mockery flashed across his eyes. He lightly said, Jiang Yuqing, you came quickly. Eldest young master Jiang, you came so quickly. We just arrived, yet you followed right behind us. Jiang Yuqing's expression froze. My cultivation level isn't as high as Qin Yi's, and I'm also injured. Logically speaking, it's impossible for me to arrive so quickly. The most important thing is that I didn't come with the two of them, yet I still came here. Without a proper reason, it definitely can't be justified. Not long after you left, I received Wan'er's call for help, so I chased her here. Jiang Yuqing roughly explained. He didn't intend to tangle with the two of them. No matter whether they believed it or not, they had no right to question him. After all, he and Shang Guanwan were engaged, and they both had respectable statuses. It was very normal for them to have some trump cards. Then he seemed to be reprimanding and heartache as he said, Wan'er, why did you send the news so late? We almost went crazy looking for you. Shang Guanwan knew what she should do at this time. Besides, she also wanted to hide it a little. She didn't say anything, and just hugged Jiang Yuqing even tighter as she sobbed. Qini looked at the two of them nonchalantly, as if he didn't have any intention of asking. I see. Jiang Yuqing secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart as he scrutinized the surroundings in detail. He then asked, Wan'er, are you the only one here? Shang Guanwan laid in his arms, so everyone couldn't see her expression. Shang Guanwan nodded hesitantly, and her voice was muffled. This means, we've already dealt with Chu Luiyue? Jiang Yuqing was stunned. He felt lost and even a little hurt. It was as if someone was holding a needle and stabbing it into his heart, causing a fine and continuous pain. Actually, he had been very conflicted in his heart. On one hand, Chu Luiyue had probably guessed what Shang Guanwan was doing. From all aspects, he had to kill her. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. However, on the other hand, he had been very uneasy and worried. Once he thought of the scene of Chu Luiyue being killed by Sheng Guanwan, he felt very uncomfortable. Originally, he didn't intend to come. However, by the time he reacted, he was already here. Somehow, it was as if he was being driven by something. Jiang Yuqing didn't dare to think too much, as if there was a taboo in his heart. Once touched, it would be a complete collapse. Sheng Guanwan naturally didn't know anything about this. She just thought that Jiang Yuqing really came, because he was worried about her. After all, he knew why I came to Dahuang Swamp this time. Thinking of this, Sheng Guanwan felt hatred in her heart. I still have a bit of my Yuan meridian to recover. If it wasn't for Chu Luiyue, Jiang Yuqing looked down. Judging from this chaotic scene, a huge battle must have happened just now. He furrowed his brows slightly. Weird. If Sheng Guanwan wanted to kill Chu Luiyue, it should have been very easy. Why did it cause such a huge commotion? Could it be because of that red-tailed phoenix? Since eldest young Master Jiang is here, take the third princess and leave first. Qini spoke. I'll go and see what's down there. Jiang Yuqing followed his line of sight, and immediately understood what Qini meant. He actually wants to jump down into that strange abyss that's emitting a dark green glow? What do you want to do? When Sheng Guanwan heard this, she instantly looked up and asked agitatedly. Since I killed Chu Luiyue, I definitely won't allow anyone to save him. Jiang Yuqing patted her shoulder and persuaded her gently and patiently. Young Master Qin should have just. Jiang Yuqing's voice stopped abruptly as he pushed Sheng Guanwan away, as if he had seen a ghost. That face, which used to be considered pretty, was now covered in blood and flesh, looking as terrifying as a malicious ghost. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 747. Sheng Guanwan was suddenly pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Her expression changed, and anger rose from her heart. Just as she was about to speak, she happened to meet Jiang Yuqing's eyes. Shock, horror. There was also a trace of disgust that was hidden very deeply, but she could still see it. Sheng Guanwan was suddenly stunned, and then belatedly remembered that her face had been scratched by the red gold phoenix. Jiang Yuqing was disdaining her face? Sheng Guanwan only felt cold all over, and all the blood in her body rushed to her head. An indescribable anger exploded in her heart. Jiang Yuqing saw the change in her eyes and realized that his push just now was inappropriate. So he quickly took a step forward. Your face, how did you get this injury? His words were sincere, and his expression was anxious, as if he was very worried. But the disgust on his face just now had been deeply engraved in Sheng Guanwan's mind. There was no woman in the world who didn't care about her face, especially a princess from the Imperial family, like Sheng Guanwan, who valued her appearance even more. From her hair to her toes, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. From her hairpin to her boots, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. Her status was noble, and she was the center of attention. Her every word and action had to be paid special attention. Not to mention her face, with a disfigured face. Who knew what kind of joke she would be if she went out? Sheng Guanwan had been on the verge of death before, and it wasn't easy for her to survive. She didn't have time to think about her face at all. Now, Jiang Yuqing's reaction finally reminded her of this matter, and it caused a great shock to her. Sheng Guanwan sneered. You didn't ask me if it hurt, but asked me how I got this injury first? Jiang Yuqing secretly said that he had miscalculated. Normally, he definitely wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. But just now, he didn't take any precautions, and most of his attention wasn't on Sheng Guanwan, so his reaction was a little more direct. As a result, it turned out like this. He knew Sheng Guanwan too well. He was afraid that she would hold a grudge against him for a long time. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a headache coming on. He had experienced enough things before, and his body was barely holding on. He had no extra energy to deal with Sheng Guanwan. I don't mean anything else. I'm just too worried about you. Sheng Guanwan sneered with a mocking expression. Her expression made Jiang Yuqing feel as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat, and he didn't bother to say the rest of his explanation and comforting words. In the past, Shang Guanwan was very gentle and considerate most of the time. This was also one of the important reasons why he liked her. Although he also knew that Shang Guanwan was not as innocent and harmless as she looked, he did not mind. With such a background, it was normal for her to be scheming and scheming. However, in the past 2 years, she had become sharper and more sensitive. She would often hold on to a small matter and cause a huge commotion. Jiang Yuqing had long been tired, and his patience was wearing thin day by day. He let out a long sigh in his heart, tried his best to suppress his impatience, and persuaded, "Wonder, these are all wounds. Wonder, these are all superficial wounds. After we go back and apply Bingji ointment on them for a while, they will naturally heal." Previously, Yuji also accidentally hurt her face, but it healed quickly. "You can't see anything." Shang Guanwan didn't think much of it, and listened to his words, as if she was listening to a joke. Of course, she knew that the wounds on her face could be healed. However, Jiang Yuqing's push just now, "I will never forget it." Qini was too lazy to care about the two of them, and walked straight over. Chang Wanzhou immediately followed. Qini glanced at him. "Just stay there. Even I find it dangerous. Isn't Chang Wanzhou courting death by coming over?" Chang Wanzhou moved. After hesitating for a while, he still listened to Qini. "I know my limits. If Qini went over, he might be able to bring Chu Liyue back. But if I go, I might just become a burden." Shang Guanwan glanced over from the corner of her eye, and saw Qini walking to the edge. She immediately said, "You can't go down." Qini acted like he didn't hear her. Shang Guanwan anxiously said, "It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous down there. You'll just be courting death if you go." Jiang Yuqing also looked over and knitted his brows. "It seems like Chu Liyue fell down there. That aura is very dangerous, and Chu Liyue should have gone down for a while already. I'm afraid." Rumble. A loud boom suddenly came from the abyss. Qin Yi's expression changed. The dark green light glowed brightly. A strong force surged out from within. The surrounding black swamp started to surge crazily. Qin Yi originally wanted to rush in directly, but he was stopped by the crazy force outside. At that moment the world spun. The few of them disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in the underground of the mystic forest. Bang! The dull sound of a heavy object hitting the ground was heard. After that sound it didn't stop. Accompanying it were all sorts of painful cries. This sound made Qin Yi abruptly open his eyes. He suddenly came out of the dark underground, and the surrounding light was so piercing that it hurt his eyes. However, he still bore with the pain, and quickly looked around. We're still in the mystic forest. Judging from the messy and broken trees around us, it shouldn't be far from where we were previously. He looked up and indeed saw that mother tree in the distance. Chang Wanzhou wasn't far behind him to the right, and he didn't seem to be severely injured. Jiang Yuqing and Shang Guanwan were in front of him. There was a distance between the two of them. When he looked further away, there were people all around them. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry, and some were disciples from other clans. Qin Yi knitted his brows. It seems like everyone has been chased out. Whose power was that just now? It's actually so strong, even I can't resist it at all. Big brother. This was Lei Laoxi's voice. Qin Yi turned around, and indeed saw Lei Laoxi running over. When he reached Qin Yi, Lei Laoxi anxiously asked, "Big brother her?" Qin Yi cut him off. "Hello, third princess." Lei Laoxi hurriedly kept quiet, but his eyes were still filled with anxiousness and worry. Where's Chu Liyue? I don't know why, but everyone was chased out by a strong force just now. He immediately saw Big Brother here, and rushed over excitedly, but he realized that Chu Liyue wasn't here. We've already found Shang Guanwan and Jiang Yuqing, so why is Her Highness missing? Qin Yi's expression dulled. We haven't found her yet. You haven't found her? How can this be? Lei Laoxi suddenly thought of something, and his voice stopped abruptly as shock flashed across his eyes. He then swiftly scanned his surroundings, and carefully scanned everyone's faces. No, it's still not. Her Highness is actually not here. Unwilling to give up, he lifted his feet, and walked to the other side. At this moment, Shang Guanwan's voice was heard. Everyone should have come out by now. Could it be that those who haven't come out have already? Digression. The fifth update was around 6:30 p.m. She silently jotted it down in her notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 748. Shang Guanwan didn't finish her sentence. That was because Lei Laosi looked over. This time, he didn't scold her with a hoarse voice and only glanced at Shang Guanwan. However, that glance was extremely cold. He was originally very capable, and with this cold and fierce glance, he was even more intimidating. Shang Guanwan subconsciously shuddered, and a tinge of fear grew in her heart. She subconsciously swallowed the rest of her words. However, the hands in her sleeves were already tightly clenched. She looked down and hid the anger in her eyes. When I leave this place, I must find a chance to settle this Lei Laosi. I still remember the scene of Lei Laosi fighting with me previously. I'll settle the old and new grudges together then. Lei Laosi sneered, and his expression looked extremely ferocious and scary. I can see through Shang Guanwan's thoughts. If I wasn't in a hurry to find Her Highness, I definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Lei Laosi retracted his gaze and walked forward with big strides. This time, Qini didn't stop him. Lei Laosi searched very carefully. Even though he remembered Chu Liyue's figure, he still seriously looked at every face that he passed by. Some had their backs facing him, and some were lying on the floor. He walked over patiently and searched them one by one. After confirming that it wasn't her, he then continued forward. Shang Guanwan looked at Lei Laosi's back view and knitted her brows tightly. She turned and saw Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu. Mu Qinghe walked over. Elder Qiushi also came along with her. He quickly caught up to Mu Qinghe and shouted excitedly, Mu Qinghe, you're the one who gave me the permission to do so. He said excitedly, Your Highness, we finally found you. You don't know how worried we were for you for such a long time. Mu Qinghe glanced at him and didn't say anything. She then bowed to Shang Guanwan and Jiang Yuqing respectively. Your Highness, eldest young master. Elder Qiushi wiped his tears with his sleeve. Your Highness, we are relieved to see that you are safe and sound. We didn't look for you in vain. Shang Guanwan's attention was finally attracted by his words. She frowned and looked puzzled. Elder Qiushi, what do you mean by that? You guys have been looking for me all this time? Elder Qiushi immediately recounted what had happened. Of course, he emphasized his concern for Shang Guanwan, and emphasized that it was under his urging that everyone finally decided to come down to look for her. Because these people were not bound by the roots the second time they came down. Shang Guanwan was not very clear about this. So that's how it is. Thank you for your hard work. Shang Guanwan gritted her teeth and said word by word. If it weren't for these people, she wouldn't have been delayed by Chu Liyue. Elder Qiushi was talking smugly when he suddenly noticed that Shang Guanwan's mood seemed to be a bit off, so he kept quiet. His gaze quickly swept across Shang Guanwan's face. I wonder what exactly she went through for her to end up like this. Even though Elder Qiushi's gaze was extremely light, and his movements were extremely small, Shang Guanwan still noticed it. The resentment in her heart deepened, but she couldn't flare up in front of so many people right now. She hurriedly took out a scarf and covered her face. Although her forehead and eyebrows were exposed, and the ghastly wounds could still be seen, it still looked much better than her entire face that was torn apart. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, Lei Laosi and Chu Liyue seemed to have a good relationship. Do you know what happened? Mu Qinghe shook her head and said hesitantly, Lei Laosi and Lei Laosi have been guarding the nine-eyed beasts for a long time. Lei Laosi and the other two have always been in charge of guarding the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Now that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant has broken through and become a red-tailed phoenix, it has made an agreement with Chu Liyue. It's probably related to this matter. It was fine if they didn't mention the red-tailed phoenix, but the moment they mentioned Shang Guanwan, she was filled with anger. The mythical beast that originally belonged to her was gone, and it even scratched her face. Now that Chu Liyue was dead, that mythical beast definitely wouldn't be able to live either. This place is very dangerous. We must leave as soon as possible. Jiang Yuqing walked over and said in a low voice. Shang Guanwan wanted to refute, but she saw Jiang Yuqing looking at a certain spot with a solemn expression. She couldn't help but follow his line of sight, and her breathing suddenly stopped. She saw that the mother tree was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. A gust of wind blew past, and countless leaves turned from green to yellow before falling down. What was even more terrifying was that after those leaves fell to the ground, they actually silently transformed into puddles of blood. Very quickly, a blood-colored puddle was piled up on the ground, and it was still spreading to the surroundings at a terrifying speed. Everywhere it passed by, everything was silently corroded. Such a bloody and bizarre scene caused everyone to be dumbstruck. Everyone hurriedly got up and kept retreating. We can't stay in this place anymore. Let's go. Let's go. The crowd was in chaos. Vaguely, someone seemed to be sucking something. Lu Yu, where are you? Mu Hongyu, Yi ran, and the rest were looking for Chu Luyue. There were also many black cavalry soldiers who were looking for Chu Luyue's whereabouts. Miss Chu, you guys search here, we'll go over there. Okay. Almost half of the people in the crowd were looking for Chu Luyue. Shang Guanwan was stunned by this scene. What was going on? What happened when she wasn't around? Just as she was about to ask, she suddenly heard a cracking sound. She lowered her head and saw that there was a crack on the pure gold armor. Shang Guanwan widened her eyes in shock. However, soon after, the crack began to spread rapidly. Bang! The pure gold armor dissipated. It turned into powder. At the same time, Chu Luyue was falling into the abyss. Her surroundings were strange and colorful. Her vision was chaotic, and she couldn't see anything. In the blur, a figure chased after her. It was Dumpling. It flew to Chu Luyue's body and lifted her up. Dumpling flapped its wings, wanting to leave with Chu Luyue. However, there seemed to be an invisible suction force below, dragging them all the way down. Violent turbulence spread out in all directions. The lower they went, the more terrifying it was. Countless small wounds instantly appeared on Chu Luyue's body. However, at this moment, her body was suddenly enveloped by a layer of faint golden light. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 749. The golden light enveloped Chu Luyue's body, isolating the surrounding terrifying airflow. Chu Luyue's face was filled with astonishment. This is glazed barrier? She could feel that this was indeed the power of the glazed barrier. But why did it turn from silver to gold? Furthermore, the glazed barrier was usually a spherical barrier. Chu Luyue had never seen a barrier that formed a layer of protection. Rather than calling it a barrier, it was better to call it armor. Yes, it was an armor. With such a tight fit, other than the fact that it wasn't a real object, it wasn't much different from an armor. Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luyue's mind, she saw the golden light on her arms suddenly condense. At first, she didn't notice it, but when she saw the strange patterns on it, she finally realized that something was wrong. Why did these patterns look so familiar? Chu Luyue stared at it for a while, then looked at her body. Indeed, she found that the golden light on other parts of her body was also condensing. From top to bottom, at her chest, a silver light suddenly flashed. Chu Luyue lowered her head to take a look, and her eyelids twitched violently, because in front of her chest, there was actually a heart protection mirror. Chu Luyue blinked her eyes, and a trace of disbelief surged in her heart. This is, as if to confirm her guess, the surrounding golden light condensed even faster. Not long after, it completely formed the appearance of an armor. This armor wasn't brand new, and there were many marks on it, as if it had experienced many intense battles. The faint golden color, warm and simple, thick and heavy. It perfectly fit Chu Luyue's body, as if it was specially made for her, outlining the perfect lines of her body. Chu Luyue was stunned for a long time. Looking at the armor that suddenly appeared on her body, she held her breath. There seemed to be blood flowing through her eardrums, and it was beating violently like her heart. Chu Luyue's breathing became hurried, and her entire body seemed to be ignited. Her cheeks were boiling, but her eyes were as bright as the most resplendent night sky. Pure gold sacred armor. This was really the pure gold sacred armor. Originally, she thought that it had been taken away by Shangguan, but she didn't expect it to appear here, on her body. Stars flashed in front of her eyes. Chu Luiyue looked up. Countless golden streams of light converged, and finally condensed into a helmet. It was the helmet of the pure gold sacred armor. Chu Luiyue's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She slowly stretched her hand, and held the helmet in her hand. It was cool to the touch, but it also had a trace of boiling heat. An extremely bright light, from the top of the helmet's helmet. Immediately, with the light with the pure gold sacred armor's body armor, the armor pure gold sacred armor, instantly like the wind with the wind, everything as it was as if a layer of dust had finally been wiped off, revealing its original color and luster. The pure armor recognize. It's as Chu Luiyue never expected the pure gold armor to return to her side in such a manner. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why the pure gold sacred armor didn't recognize Shangguan as its new owner was most likely because her soul still existed. But how did it come about? Chu Luiyue recalled the situation just now and was suddenly stunned. Could it be? Is this really related to the glazed barrier? At the thought of this, she tried to summon the glazed barrier. The pure gold sacred armor was overflowing with light and colors, and it gradually became transparent. It was like a layer of transparent and colorless soft armor that perfectly covered Chu Luiyue's body. Only when one looked carefully could one see the faint engravings on it. This was indeed the glazed barrier. But this was also the pure gold sacred armor. It seemed like, after encountering the pure gold sacred armor, the glazed barrier had changed. These two things had invisibly merged into one. And in the end, it appeared before her eyes in this way. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. A scene suddenly appeared in her mind. The day before she left country, Yao Chen's imperial capital, she accompanied Rong Xiu to play chess, and informed him that she was about to leave and head to the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu said that the glazed barrier he gave her previously was damaged, so he would give her a new one. At that time, Chu Luiyue didn't pay much attention to it, because the second glazed barrier was exactly the same as the first one. From the outside, there was no difference at all. It wasn't until she arrived at Xiling, participated in the Wanzhong competition, and entered the Tianling God realm, that she finally realized that this glazed barrier seemed to be a little different. Its defensive power was extraordinary. At that time, although Chu Luiyue was curious, she didn't think too much about it because the situation was urgent. Later on, he gradually forgot about this matter. If the glazed barrier hadn't taken the initiative to appear and protect her this time, she might not have remembered the existence of this little thing. Now that she thought about it, she had a clue. What kind of yuan instrument could easily block the sword aura of the long yuan sword? Although the glazed barrier was divided into several grades, this kind of power was simply too shocking. Even the best glazed barrier she had seen in her previous life might not be able to do this. Rong Xiu. Chu Luiyue mumbled softly with a complicated expression. A bold thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Rong Xiu. Does he know something? Thousands of miles away, in the room, two people sat opposite each other. Pa 36 respected Elder Ming placed his last piece. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces went through an intense battle before the victor was finally decided. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes lit up. Hee, I finally won against you, Your Highness. Rong Xiu put the chess piece back into the chess jar and looked up with a faint smile. Respected Elder's power is superb. I admit defeat. His words were said casually, as if he had already expected this outcome. 36 respected Elder Ming was originally stroking his beard with a smile. When he saw Rong Xiu's expression, his heart skipped a beat. He accidentally pulled out 3 strands of his silver-white beard. You, did Your Highness purposely let me win? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. No, I didn't. I thought too much and lost this round. Don't give me that. Do you think I can't tell whether you went easy on me or not? 36 respected Elder Ming glared at him angrily. When he played chess with Rong Xiao, he had almost never won. After studying for so long, he did not expect it to end up like this. His joyful mood was instantly reduced. However, after thinking about it, this outcome was normal. 36 respected Elder Ming was relieved. You started learning chess at the age of 5. When you were 6, you had few opponents. After you were 7, even I found it hard to win against you. After losing for so many years, do you think I'm a sore loser? I'm already used to it, okay? At the start, Rong Xiao went easy on him very obviously. Later on, he gradually hit it very well. If your highness wants to, you can definitely play all the chess players in the world in your hands. 36 respected Elder Ming let out a long sigh. Rong Xiao suddenly chuckled. His thin lips curled up slightly as he leaned against the back of the chair and said lazily, "Not necessarily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 750. His voice was deep and mellow. With a chuckle, he sounded even more unrestrained. 36 respected Elder Ming lifted his eyelids and took a glance at him. Rong Xiao was smiling. There was a hint of a smile in between his eyebrows, like the beginning of spring. However, that pair of deep eyes wasn't looking at the chessboard. They were silent with hidden ripples, as though he had sunk into deep thought. 36 respected Elder Ming was a little surprised. Rong Xiao was actually a very prideful person. In terms of chess skills, he could be said to be the best of the best. 36 respected Elder Ming felt that his standard was already not bad. However, in front of Rong Xiao, he couldn't even find out his bottom line. At the very least, among the people that he knew, no one could win against Rong Xiao in this aspect. No, it should be said that there was no one who could compete with him. Your Highness, do you mean that there is someone who can compete with you? Yes. Rong Xiao tilted his body slightly and propped up his elbows. No one knew what he thought of, but he suddenly laughed. I have lost quite a number of times. 36 respected Elder Ming was even more shocked. From what he said, he didn't lose because he went easy. He really lost. There is actually such a person in this world. It wasn't an easy thing to win against Rong Xiao. Of course there is. Rong Xiao's smile deepened. However, there was a tinge of extremely faint gentleness in his eyes. However, if we were to meet again now, my chances of winning would be higher. Knock knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Come in. Rong Xiao said indifferently. Yan Qing walked in and bowed to the two of them one after another before saying, Your Highness, 36 respected Elder Ming. The people from the Ming tribe are here. They want to see 36 respected Elder Ming. The Ming tribe was one of the tribes. It was also the clan that 36 respected Elder Ming came from. Because of 36 respected Elder Ming, the Ming tribe's status wasn't low. However, 36 respected Elder Ming's expression changed. He immediately became impatient. Why are they here again? Didn't I say that this old man is very busy, and told them not to disturb this old man's business? Yan Qing lowered her head and said respectfully, Respected Elder, after you came out of seclusion this time, they sent people over. But at that time, you were busy discussing important matters with the other revered elders, so you didn't get to meet him. Now that they've heard that you finally returned from your travels, they've specially rushed over. These bastards definitely didn't have any good intentions. It's fine if I don't meet him. Go back and tell them that this old man is in seclusion. I don't have time to see them recently. Every time they asked to see him, nothing good ever came out of it. Who knew why they were here this time? One had to know that not long ago, Rong Xiao had personally led an army to wipe out a division. Weren't they just looking for trouble by coming here at such a sensitive time? Missing. They were all gone. Yan Qing hesitated for a moment and said, Respected Elder, the news of you and His Highness playing chess for a few days has already spread outside. They also know about it. Otherwise, how would those people dare to block him here? 36 respected Elder Ming was extremely frustrated. Seeing his reaction, Yan Qing knew that it was best for her not to say anything else. But she had to say those words. In the end, she could only bite the bullet and say, "They also said that they'll continue to wait for you here. Whenever you're done with your work, you can just meet them." 36 respected Elder Ming was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. In the end, he could only leave. From the looks of it, those people from the Ming division couldn't avoid being reprimanded again. A long time after he left, Rongxiu sat up straight. He moved his wrist, and a crystal barrier appeared on the chessboard. Sunlight shone in from the window and shone on the crystal-clear crystal barrier. It was bright and moving. Then there was the second one. Then there was the third one. Rongxiu took out a total of 6 crystal barriers and placed them in a row on the chessboard. He looked at the crystal barriers in front of him and laughed softly. "I didn't expect it to be so fast. I've refined so many for nothing." He refined these crystal barriers according to different levels and wanted to give them to her gradually. But when he knew that she was planning to go to the Tianling dynasty, he was worried and gave her that one directly. What he didn't expect was that she would actually. Rongxiu's thin lips curled up. Actually, this was within reason. After all, it was originally hers. It caused these glass worlds to have no place to be used. Yanqing stood at the side and quickly raised his eyes to take a look. He saw that his master had waved his sleeves, and those crystal barriers were silently turned into dust. A light breeze blew, and those flying dust instantly flew up. Then it dissipated. She quickly lowered her head. Master had spent a lot of effort to refine these crystal barriers. Now they were all destroyed. Could it be that Miss Lu Yu sighed? "Keep all these," Rongxiu said lightly. "Yes." Yanqing hurriedly went forward. Looking at the faint marks left on the chessboard, she faintly felt her heart ache. These were all top-grade crystal barriers made with the best materials and personally refined by her master. If they were released, who knew how many people would be willing to go bankrupt just to get one? What a pity, what a pity! She had followed her master for so many years, but the number of times she saw her master personally refining yuan instruments was few and far between. And most of them were for Miss Lu Yu. Her actions were clean and nimble. She quickly cleaned up the chessboard and retreated. When she reached the door, Yanqing paused for a moment and asked again, "Your Highness, the people from the Ming division, don't you plan to meet them?" Those people from the Ming division had always been restless. No one knew why they were here this time. Although 36 respected Elder Ming was suppressing them, they were his clan after all. He was often restrained because of this. Rongxiu laughed lazily and said casually, "They asked to meet 36 respected Elder Ming." After killing the chicken to warn the monkey, the other divisions were much more well-behaved. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they had to reconsider their own abilities. Moreover, with 36 respected Elder Ming around, they couldn't cause trouble. Yanqing lowered his head and replied, "Yes, I will take my leave." After speaking, he respectfully retreated. After closing the door, the room fell into silence again. After a while, Rongxiu looked in front of him. "Come out." A huge white figure flashed past. It was Shueshue. She walked in front of Rongxiu and lay on the ground. Only a pair of icy blue eyes stared at Rongxiu. She looked very lovable, which was a rare sight. God knows how much she had been holding it in during this period of time. She missed her so much. "Aha." Rongxiu glanced at her indifferently. "You seem to think that this move will work on anyone?" Shueshue's expression froze. The paw that was about to act coquettishly froze in midair. She didn't know how to continue. After being stunned for a while, she angrily retracted her paw. She angrily tilted her head to the side and let out a whimper. She wanted a warm and soft hug. Rongxiu's gaze turned cold. "Dream on, Shueshue," Rongxiu continued. "All right. I forgot to tell you. She has found little 9. Shueshue suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes wide. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 751. On Rongxiu's elegant face, there was a faint smile on his lips, as if he was talking about a small matter that had nothing to do with him. However, Shueshue was very clear that his expression, what he said must be true. "Awoo." Many complicated emotions flashed through Shueishue's eyes, and it let out a low whimper. It first got up and seemed to want to go out, but after taking 2 steps, it came back and lay down beside Rongxiu's feet. Of course it was happy. After all, its relationship with little Nine had always been very deep, but it felt a little lost in its heart. Thinking that little Nine could be with it every day after it went back, Shueishue was very envious. Rongxiu glanced at it from the corner of his eyes. Seeing that it was tired, he said casually, "Also, it has already broken through to become a divine beast." Shueishue raised its head and laid down lazily again. So what if it was a divine beast? It was as if it wasn't. Rongxiu smiled and finally added the last fatal sentence. "Its level is higher than yours." "Owa." Shueishue was immediately provoked, and looked at Rongxiu in disbelief. Looking at Rongxiu's silent smile, Shueishue immediately understood that what he said was true. Shueishue was very hurt. It turned around and jumped out of the window. "Owa. Cultivate. I can't lose." The soldiers in charge of guarding outside heard the sound, and looked over in surprise. What happened to His Highness's magical beast? Shueishue's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. Yan Qing, who had just walked outside, couldn't help but look up and shook her head sympathetically. It seemed that it was provoked by Master again. Mystic Forest. Chu Luyue was wearing a pure gold sacred armor, blocking all the violent turbulence in the surroundings. Although they hadn't seen each other for a long time, this familiar feeling hadn't changed. Chu Luyue was happy in his heart, but he still couldn't figure out the mystery of Rongxiu and the colored glass world. In the end, Chu Luyue gritted his teeth. The next time they meet, I must ask him face to face. All of a sudden, the surrounding light began to ripple like water. Chu Luyue looked down and vaguely saw that the light seemed to be coming from something. It was just that she was still unable to see clearly due to the surrounding light. But the closer he got, the heavier the pressure became. Dumpling's movements gradually slowed down. Clearly, she was also being suppressed. Finally, 1 man and 1 beast landed. Chu Luyue jumped down from Dumpling's back. With the protection of the pure gold sacred armor, this power and pressure would not pose any threat to her. Therefore, her movements were more agile. Dumpling had a few more wounds on her body, but fortunately, they were all superficial wounds and had already begun to heal. The bloodline power in its body was extremely strong, so its recovery ability naturally increased as well. Chu Luyue felt more at ease as she surveyed her surroundings. This place seemed to be just a simple cave. The walls were chiseled, and the ground beneath his feet was hard and uneven, not black mud. In the middle, there was a protruding rock. The rock's shape was irregular, and only the top seemed to have been flattened by something, making it smooth and clean. There's a piece of crystal on top. That crystal was about the size of an adult man's 2 palms. It was about an inch thick, and had an irregular shape. It was glowing with a rich and clear green color like jade. As the light emitted from above was surging upwards, the space at the bottom wasn't affected much. Chu Luyue stared closely at that piece of crystal, and vaguely saw a few broken runes on it. Could that be the broken seal that Qini mentioned previously? As Chu Luyue was thinking, she saw the runes on it floating gently. The light on the crystal also swayed as gently as water ripples. Chu Luyue took a step forward. Suddenly, she felt that the origin power in her body seemed to have become restless. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. She then realized that this crystal was actually absorbing the surrounding energy. The terrifying suction force that she felt just now was coming from above. She clenched her teeth and continued walking forward. Dumpling originally wanted to stop her, but after some thought, she didn't say anything and just followed closely behind her. At the same time, she handed something over. Chu Luyue turned around and realized that it was the black shield that she took from Shangguanwan previously. No, I shouldn't say that, because this black shield was hers to begin with. Chu Luyue took the black shield, and a hint of nostalgia flashed across her face. This black shield actually had a long history. Because of this, she found it together with the pure gold armor back then. At first, Chu Luyue thought that the armor and shield were a pair, but she later realized that wasn't the case. The pure gold armor quickly recognized its owner, and that was how she learned its name. However, she tried many methods to awaken this black shield, but she still couldn't. Thus, she didn't even know its name until now. However, even if she didn't inject her force and didn't recognize its owner, the defense of this black shield was still extremely strong. Therefore, Chu Luiyue had always carried it with her, and would only use it when she encountered a dangerous battle. The world only knew that the pure gold armor was a rare treasure, and the Empress relied on this armor to win every battle. But they didn't know that at least half of the credit belonged to this black shield. Actually, in Chu Luiyue's heart, she had always thought that the level of this black shield might be stronger than the pure gold armor. Because until she broke through to the 8th rank warrior, she was still unable to move this black shield. Without any assistance, the power of this thing was still not inferior to the pure gold armor. If it really recognized its owner, she wondered how powerful it would be. Shang Guanwan only thought that this black shield was useful, and didn't take it to heart. Previously, when the black shield was snatched away, although she was furious, it was only because her item was snatched away, and not because she felt that she had lost a treasure. If she knew the true power of this black shield in the future, she would probably regret it so much that her intestines would turn green. Chu Luiyue placed the black shield in front of her and walked forward. With this layer of protection, that terrifying suction force was indeed blocked outside. Chu Luiyue gradually got closer, and stopped when she was 5 steps away from the crystal. She then looked at it intently. From here, she could basically see the appearance of the crystal stone clearly. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue's eyes focused. In the middle of the crystal stone, there was a shuttle-like thing the size of a fingernail. Chu Luiyue frowned with uncertainty. It seemed to be a seed. It's actually the origin slaughtering sacred seed? A voice filled with shock sounded. Chu Luiyue turned her head. Taizu, you recognize this thing? What is the origin slaughtering sacred seed? She had never heard of it before. Taizu stared at the crystal stone with disbelief on his face. After a while he said, I do recognize it. Many years ago, I saw it once, but at that time, he had seen it in the hands of a great expert. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 752. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for this thing to appear here. This was because the power of space here could not withstand the pressure of the 2 Tian baby at all. He had once seen with his own eyes that the Almighty had used a heaven-wrecking holy seed to easily destroy a dynasty. That was right. It was a dynasty. An existence like the Tianling dynasty. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying this thing was. It was the first time that Chu Luiyue had seen Taizu with such an expression on his face. In fact, one could see some clues from the name. 2 Tian baby. What kind of thing dared to have such a presumptuous name? Chu Luiyue had read countless books, and she had even read many unique ancient books. However, she had never heard of this name before. Looking at Taizu's appearance, it must be very powerful. This thing can't be explained in a sentence or two. You only need to know that this thing is extremely powerful, and also extremely dangerous. Taizu looked at Chu Luiyue with a grave expression. We can't stay here. We must leave as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly and looked up. How could they get out? Only then did Taizu realize that Chu Luiyue had been dragged down by this thing. It would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens if they wanted to go back. He sighed deeply and frowned. Looking at this thing now, it seemed to be very calm. It should be because it was trapped by the crystal outside. But who knew when it would come out? When that time came, even he would not be able to save Chu Luiyue. Seeing Taizu's worried look, Chu Luiyue was not particularly worried. She tried to persuade Taizu, don't worry too much. Maybe we can find a way to leave soon. Taizu sighed in his heart. This girl still did not know how terrifying the power of the 2 Tian baby was. If this was an ordinary situation, why would he be so worried? He did not know who had placed the seal on it. Now that the seal had broken, he was afraid that. Chu Luiyue took a few steps back, and sat cross-legged on the flat ground at the edge of the cliff. She held the black shield in front of her. Taizu looked at her in confusion. Luyu, what are you doing? Chu Luiyue put her hands on her knees and smiled. Thinking won't solve any problems. It's better to take advantage of this time to cultivate. This place may be dangerous, but the energy of heaven and earth is very rich. The speed of cultivation is several times faster than in the outside. Taizu was dumbfounded. This was a matter of life and death. Why was this girl still thinking about these things? In such a short period of time, if he were to cultivate desperately, how much could he improve? He really didn't know whether to say that she was fearless because she didn't know, or that she had gone crazy from cultivating. Shang Guanjing held his forehead when he saw Chu Luiyue slowly close her eyes, and really planned to start cultivating. Taizuyu. He really couldn't do anything to this girl. He looked back at the two Tian baby, and walked over to Chu Luiyue, resigned to his fate. If something really happened, the girl would be safer with him in front of her. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes, and looked at the translucent figure standing in front of her. Her eyes welled up with tears, and a warm current seemed to surge in her heart. Taizu, thank you, she said word by word seriously. Taizu turned around and looked at her with a deep gaze. Chu Luiyue was confused by this gaze. She unconsciously stopped her back and asked tentatively, "What do you mean?" Taizu. Taizu smiled bitterly, shook his head and sighed, but his expression was extremely gentle. Isn't it natural for me to protect my juniors? Chu Luiyue was stunned on the spot. Her mind went blank. Taizu knew? When did he know? She had never said. Seeing Chu Luiyue's expression, the last trace of doubt in Taizu's heart was completely eliminated. As expected, Chu Luiyue was really his bloodline. There seemed to be waves surging in the depths of his eyes, as countless complicated emotions surged within. He had so many questions to ask her, but when they reached the tip of his tongue, he couldn't say anything. After a while, Chu Luiyue finally reacted and said hesitantly, "Taizu, what do you mean by that?" Ling Xiaopom. Seeing that Chu Luiyue still refused to admit it, Taizu smiled and shook his head. Ling Xiaopom can't be practiced by anyone who isn't a member of the Tianling dynasty's royal family. You, on the other hand, performed the third level, didn't you? Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. So that was it. At that time, she had only thought that Shang Guanwan hadn't seen the third level of Ling Xiaopom, so she had simply made a move. However, she had forgotten that this palm technique was created by Taizu. Even if she had only sketched an outline, and hadn't really performed it, Taizu's eyesight was extraordinary. From then on, the great ancestor should have guessed something, right? Being suddenly exposed like this, Chu Luiyue felt a little embarrassed for a moment. Thinking of the various disguises she had used to deceive Taizu, she didn't know how to face it. Taizu just looked at her quietly, his eyes kind. After a while, Chu Luiyue stood up. She looked deeply at Taizu, the corners of her eyes slightly red. Then, she lifted the hem of her clothes, knelt down, and bowed her head to kowtow. Unfilial descendant Shang Guanyu greets Taizu. Chu Luiyue was trapped, and the crowd outside was about to go crazy from anxiety. Lei Laosi, Mu Hongyu, and the rest searched seriously, and they had to confirm every face over and over again, afraid that they would miss something. However, even after they had checked all the people who were chased out, they still didn't find any traces of Chu Luiyue. Lei Laosi was almost in despair as he stared at the rapidly withering mother tree in a daze. Could it be that Her Highness really? Laosi, come back. Qini suddenly spoke. Lei Laosi turned around in a daze. Qini shook his head silently. Since we've already searched one round, and can't find Her Highness, then she must be trapped down there. Big brother. Lei Laosi wasn't willing to move. We didn't protect Her Highness well in the past, and I didn't expect it to be the same this time. I only hate that I can't take Her Highness's place to suffer. If I could use my life to exchange for Her Highness's life, I definitely wouldn't have any objections. Qini knew that once he became stubborn, even 9 bulls couldn't pull him back. Thus, he decided not to persuade him, and just looked at Chang Wanzhou at the side. Are you sure? Chang Wanzhou nodded. I can confirm that she's still alive. It's just that I can't find her location in such a short period of time. There seems to be an extremely strong force under this mystic forest that isolates everything. Qini felt more at ease. My instincts also feel that Her Highness is fine, but if this drags on, it'll be hard to say. We must save her, but these people here are really troublesome. He looked at Sheng Guanwan. At this moment, Sheng Guanwan was standing rooted to the ground in a daze, and her eyes were filled with shock. What happened just now? The pure gold armor actually turned into powder and completely disappeared. It was clearly fine just now. How did this happen? Quite a few people around saw this scene, and at this moment, they all quietened down and had different expressions. Amidst the embarrassing silence, a questioning voice that seemed to be suppressing something was clearly heard. Did the third princess break Her Highness' pure gold sacred armor? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 753. This sentence was very cold and harsh, like a sharp thorn that directly pierced through the dead silence. Sheng Guanwan looked in the direction of the voice and frowned. The person who spoke was a black cavalry soldier wearing armor. His face and body were covered in blood, and he was currently staring at her. His gaze was as cold as a knife, dense with anger that was about to burst out. Sheng Guanwan's expression instantly turned cold. Who do you think you are? How dare you question this princess like this? Who gave a mere black cavalry soldier the courage to speak to her with such a tone and expression? Even an important official in the Imperial court wouldn't dare to not give her face like this. That soldier straightened his neck and continued speaking. This lowly one is a black cavalry lieutenant, Tian Zhuangzhuang. This lowly one isn't questioning your highness, it's just a question. The pure gold armor was the crown princess's personal armor when she was alive, and it hasn't been broken after hundreds of battles. Now that it's being used by the third princess, it hasn't been through any battles, yet it's been directly destroyed. Third princess, don't you intend to explain? Sheng Guanwan was so angry that she laughed. The crown princess? Sheng Guan, you couldn't be more dead. And now the entire Tianling dynasty was under her, Sheng Guanwan's control. She even killed Sheng Guanyu. So what if she used her armor? Not to mention a mere black cavalry lieutenant. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, no one had the right to question her like this. It's just a piece of armor. Why should this princess give you an explanation? She looked deeply at Tian Zhuangzhuang, then spoke lightly to Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, this is the soldier you're leading? Isn't this too unruly? She didn't even need to personally deal with this kind of reckless person. With just a word, Mu Qinghe would have to deal with him. However, the expected scene didn't happen. Mu Qinghe's face was expressionless, but her chin was somewhat tense, as if covered with a layer of frost. This is indeed an item that Empress Concubine treasured greatly when she was alive. The third princess might not know this, but to the soldiers of the Black Cavalry, this pure gold sacred armor had an extraordinary meaning. Now that it has been destroyed, the last general knows that you didn't do it on purpose, but please give everyone an explanation. Sheng Guanwan was shocked. Mu Qinghe, what is the meaning of this? Did he want her to explain or apologize? Just for a pure gold armor? Mu Qinghe met her gaze, her eyes firm and persistent. It was obvious that he wasn't going to let the matter rest. Sheng Guanwan trembled with anger. The pure gold sacred armor suddenly shattered. She also didn't know what was going on. She didn't even have time to feel sorry for herself. Yet she had to explain herself to these people? What a joke. She looked at Jiang Yuqing angrily. Mu Qinghe was his woman. However, Jiang Yuqing seemed to be in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. Sheng Guanwan called him twice before he came back to his senses. However, there was still a hint of disappointment and worry in his eyes. Sheng Guanwan rarely saw him like this, and she felt uneasy. But the most important thing now was still the pure gold sacred armor. After Jiang Yuqing reacted, he frowned and looked at Sheng Guanwan. What kind of powerful treasure was the pure gold sacred armor? It had always been fine. Why did it suddenly shatter when Sheng Guanwan wore it? Sheng Guanwan was infuriated by his glare. However, considering that there were still many people watching, she could only swallow her anger. Jiang Yuqing also cared about each other's face, and didn't say anything in front of Mu Qinghe. The third princess has just experienced a life and death situation, and is still in shock. Although the pure gold sacred armor is important, it's not as important as her. You are the Black Cavalry. You know best what your first priority is. Don't forget your identity. These words were very serious. If it was in the past, Mu Qinghe would definitely not continue to say anything. But it was different this time. Mu Qinghe's expression didn't change as she said calmly, "Eldest young master, it's precisely because we are all Black Cavalry that we are very insistent on this matter. Even if I don't ask, they will ask until they get a reasonable explanation." Jiang Yuqing frowned and looked at the Black Cavalry around him. Sure enough, those soldiers had already gathered around and were looking over here. Moreover, their expressions were stubborn, exactly the same as Tian Zhuangzhuang, who asked first. It was as if they wouldn't leave if Shang Guanwan didn't explain. The atmosphere was heavy. There was dead silence. At this point, Shang Guanwan finally realized that something was amiss, and a hint of panic flashed across her eyes. "What are you planning to do? Are you trying to rebel?" Mu Qinghe said. "The third princess is too serious." "Third princess, you're being too serious. They just want an explanation from you." "Explanation? What explanation do they need?" Ever since Shang Guanwan took over power, she had never been so aggrieved. Previously, these people had clearly obeyed her every word. But just because she had destroyed a pure gold armor, they actually turned their backs on her. Extremely arrogant and presumptuous. When Qini saw this scene from afar, a cold smile appeared on his lips. How would Shang Guanwan, who had grown up in Xiling City with a silver spoon in her mouth, understand that military power had always been independent of imperial power? Back then, how many Black Cavalry did Her Highness risk her life to save? On the surface, this military power seemed to belong to Mu Qinghe, but in reality, it belonged to Her Highness. It was fine if they didn't mention it normally, but now that Shang Guanwan destroyed the pure gold sacred armor, it was no different from stepping on everyone's bottom line. They naturally wouldn't let her off so easily. Shang Guanwan clenched her fists tightly and almost crushed her teeth. "Shang Guanyu is dead, but I'm still restricted by her everywhere," she angrily said. "It's just a piece of scrap metal. So what if it's gone? What's there to explain?" The moment she said that, murderous intent rose from all directions. "Third princess, please be careful with your words." Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.